organisations need it.
And just very quickly, if they decide not to uprate benefits in line with inflation, how will you have that conversation with the people who vote for you?
I mean, I'm waiting to hear the policies from government because, I mean, a cabinet are yet to have that discussion and the decisions yet to be made, as we saw from conference with different views being heard. But obviously, long term, the growth agenda will hopefully mean people have more money in their pocket. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in terms of government discussions in the next couple of days.
Yeah, really good to talk to you. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you very much.
Holly Whitbread there, local Conservative councillor for Epping and Thaydon in Essex. It is 6:10.
It is. Time flies. The Ministry of Defence has sent Royal Navy warships to the North Sea to protect gas pipelines. This is after the Nord Stream pipelines were reportedly sabotaged last week.
Joining us now is Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Morning to you, Chip. Have the government got the level of security risk right here? Are they right to deploy, or are they over-egging it a little bit?
I think they are right to deploy because risk is both likelihood and impact. And what you don't want is a third thing happening. We say two's a trend and two's a pattern, three's a trend. And after Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, you don't want that on our critical national infrastructure. So it's sensible that they've done this, but it's not just the deployment of the Royal Navy ships with HMS Somerset and HMS Enterprise. There's also the maritime patrol aircraft of the P-8A Poseidon, which has an extensive intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition suite. So the real thing you need to do is obviously find and then fix any Russian activity should it be going towards those pipelines.
By fix?
That you stop them achieving their mission. So you find them where they are in the ocean and you let them know by either diplomatic means or other means that you know they're there, and therefore you raise the calculus for them. I think one of the interesting things, of course, is that we're not at war with Russia. And so what would be the rules of engagement if these such things kind of were to happen? But I'm not disheartened by this at the moment in what's happening, because Nord Stream 2 was never going to come online. That was one of the sanctions things. And you can't deal with Nord Stream 1 at the moment because the Russians are still pumping gas. So you can't get to the breach and investigate it. That would be different with us because we and the Norwegians would own those pipelines and therefore would be able to go and deal with it, because one of the things you need to do is what is the quickest route to recovery and how do you stop it from happening again? And that is part of the two of the questions you'd ask on risk management and ensuring that you have business continuity. And what this really is a business continuity issue.
What about the nuclear threat that there's been lots of talk about in recent days, concerns that President Putin, increasingly under pressure, is possibly going to carry out some sort of nuclear exercise, perhaps close to the border with Ukraine. Poland's so concerned, in front of The Guardian this morning, that they're asking the United States for nuclear weapons to be sent to their territory. I mean, if that was to happen, that's a significant escalation. Presumably the same requests would be made to the UK as well.
Yeah, but I think that's still overplayed at the moment. I don't think you mobilise 300,000 people and you do a hybrid attack on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 to go and use nuclear weapons at this time. And that nuclear train, in terms of the posture of that, has been said by US officials from the Pentagon and the State Department that it is not out of the norms of the normal activity of the Russians. So we've got to be very careful about how this is played by sensationalist headlines when it's not really there yet. And that doesn't mean that one should be complacent. And one can look at maybe three ways that they might employ ultimately nuclear weapons. One might be something like a demonstration to say we're serious, something like a small yield on Snake Island, but of course you still have a radiological fallout from that. The second one is, I'll call it tactical, but that's really a term for arms control, which is to win a battle. You dial a yield appropriate to taking out Russian, Ukrainian forces. And the third one would be strategic, and that is airburst over, for example, a number of cities to try and break the will of the Ukrainians. But that would be a whole new ballgame in terms of Russia's future in the international order in the world. And I just can't see that. But it's Putin, and Putin probably suffers from the hubris nemesis complex, and that makes him extraordinarily difficult to deal with.
Quoting a senior US official, The Telegraph says that taking Crimea is a very real possibility. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, but I don't think that the Ukrainians need to do that at the moment. So the problem the Russians have got is when they invaded Ukraine in 2014, they raised off and gathered in 2 million Crimean people, supposedly, and lost 44 million Ukrainian people. So if the Ukrainians want to drop the Kerch Bridge, that effectively kettles any Russians in Crimea, and Ukraine can take Crimea at any time they wish. So at the moment, I don't think that in a military sense is the main effort for the Ukrainians.
Major General Chip Chapman, really good to get your thoughts on all of that this morning. Thanks for joining us. It is 6:15.
Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines this morning. Sir Keir Starmer is renewing calls for Liz Truss to reverse her budget. He warns families are facing eye-watering mortgage increases. Analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a £498 monthly hike if interest rates hit 6%.
Nurses will start voting today on whether to strike over pay. It's amid warnings that record numbers are leaving the profession. Around 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing are being asked if they want to mount a campaign of industrial action in the union's first UK-wide ballot.
Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face sexual assault allegations made against him by the actor Anthony Rapp. Mr. Rapp claimed he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was just 14 years old. The actor has categorically denied the accusations.
Do you know what? I'm very excited that we're going to be speaking to Sally Harris, who runs the Great British Pub of the year 2022, story. The Gun in West Sussex.
Have you ever been to...
Voted the best pub in Britain.
What do you think make the criteria for the best pub, though?
For me, the pub snacks are really important.
So pork scratchings, scampi fries.
That's it.
Oof, you can get them anywhere. And for me, it's got to be a nice pub garden, so you can sit with a beautiful view. West Sussex is one of my favourite places in the country, so it's going to be ticking a lot of boxes on that. And I like a roaring fire in the winter, deep sofas, and a good roast. Oh gosh, I love an English.
Those are all very good, all very valid. But yeah,
but actually, I wanted to talk about the rise of the golden gap year. What is that? I hear you cry. It's a gap year for those who are newly retired, which I think is a brilliant idea. Apparently, a survey of 1,500 people said 55% of people now, a fifth of over 60s are now considering going on an extended golden gap year. Why the heck not? You've worked hard all your life.
If you've got the money.
If you've got the money, what better way to spend it than going and experiencing and seeing the world? That is something I 100%.
So you finish working, then you go on a gap year, and then you retire.
Yeah.
But I thought retirement is all for travelling anyway.
Well, you know, it's about going travelling for a year or whatever it is. Did you do a gap year?
I did.
Where did you go?
Leytonstone.
You didn't you? Worked in a post office, is that right?
Yeah, no. I have worked in. I have done work for the Royal Mail in the past. Yeah, as a postie, but no, that year I was working in a pen shop.
Oh,
or a pen distributor's.
So you just spent your year working.
Basically,
so you are entitled to this then. Once you retire, you need to get yourself on a golden gap year.
The way things are looking at the moment, I don't think I'll be taking, financially for all of us, I'll be taking a golden year. But, you know, for those who can, why not?
Yeah, well, if that is you, let us know. Have you been on one, you're saving for one, you're thinking of one, you're dreaming of one, or perhaps it will never happen. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, after the break, Kinsey Schofield will be joining us live from LA as Alec Baldwin reaches a settlement over the shooting on the set of the film Rust. Before that, the weather.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland, dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 6:23. Still to come on the programme this morning as the cost of living crisis continues to ramp up. At 6:45, we'll be discussing the rise of shoplifting.
This is as Sainsbury's decides to keep its bottles of baby formula, as you can see there, behind the counter.
At 7:45, we'll be speaking to Britain's self-proclaimed dullest man. I was a bit concerned about calling him this because it seemed really unkind, but apparently he's very, very proud of his dull status. In fact, he trades on it. So we'll be talking to him. He's releasing a new calendar all about village notice boards, no less.
But it could be quite exciting. It depends what's on the notice board.
What worries me is, what that says about you, Paul, that you are, you have the potential to find that dull calendar extremely interesting.
I have, yeah, or I thought you were going to flip it on its head and say the potential to find interesting and curiosity and everything.
Yes, perhaps that's the right way to view it, yeah.
Maybe.
There you go, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt there. We'll also be finding out about his previous creations that include roundabouts, benches, and even England and Man City midfielder Jack Grealish's calves. These are calendars.
I'm looking forward to the benches one. Get in touch with us. Actually, if you've got... Maybe there's also something even more boring, a more boring calendar than benches. or Jack Grealish's calves. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
I mean, what is dull to one person is not dull to another, you know. Let's have a quick look at some GB views before we do the next story. Politics in general. Sue's been in touch from Lincolnshire. I'm just wondering whether we're so used to being told what to do by the EU that we've forgotten how to govern.
And Patrick in Birmingham says the PM has been in office for a month. Much of that time, the nation was in mourning. She settled a lot of nerves with that speech. Again, gbviews@gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on that one.
Now then, the actor Alec Baldwin has agreed to an undisclosed settlement with the family of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins after the misfire of a prop gun on the set of the film Rust in 2021, which caused her accidental death.
Filming will start again next year with Matthew Hutchings, the widower of Helena, taking on an executive producer role.
Well, we can speak to our showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield, who joins us from LA to bring us up to date on all of this. So this has all been settled then, out of the public eye, out of court, and it means that filming will continue. I'm surprised Alec Baldwin wants the film to go ahead at all.
I know, I was thinking about that too. Is the correct term shameless? I don't know. I couldn't do that. I'd be concerned for the family, but Alec is insisting. I should stress that this was a civil lawsuit that was dropped, okay? There is still an ongoing criminal investigation. The Santa Fe Police Department, they're saying not too fast. No one is above the law, and they are continuing to investigate this death, while, you know, Matthew is agreeing to, and the producers are agreeing that this was an accidental death. The Santa Fe Police Department can still hold someone accountable. So while the civil lawsuit is now done and over with, there could still be a criminal arrest made, and Alec Baldwin could be arrested. Alec Baldwin is saying they're going to go forward with Rust, and they're going to finish this film, all cast and crew that were originally on board, starting to shoot in January of 2023, and they're doing it to honor Helena, and they're doing it to honor her son. I thought the most surprising part of this story was Matthew Hutchins, her husband, now coming on board and as an executive producer. But this story is not over yet. There could still be criminal charges, and Alec Baldwin could still be held accountable for this death.
Once the film's released, it'll be interesting to see how they do handle that. Also, accusations have been levelled at Brad Pitt.
Isn't this a wild story? Now, this issue, that Brad Pitt choked and struck his children on a private flight with Angelina Jolie and the kids back in 2016, this is coming to light due to litigation that's happening between Brad Pitt and Angelina over their winery. Angelina sold her portion of their winery, and Brad Pitt took her to court over it, said, "You needed my permission to do so." And she released this very, very concerning report where she said that on this flight that happened September, I believe it was September 14th, 2016, Brad Pitt struck and choked one of their children. He poured beer and wine on not only Angelina, but the children as well. Now, Brad is saying that this is vengeance. This did not happen. I think it could end a normal person's career, but we've grown up with Brad Pitt, so we are familiar with him, and we want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And we have to keep in mind, a judge has seen this report over the last few years, and the FBI investigated him. Both cleared him. The judge gave Brad Pitt 50-50 in regards to who gets the children. They both share custody of the children. So the FBI and a judge not concerned. It makes you wonder, what is the ultimate objective here? Is it just to crush him and his reputation, or does Angelina really have concerns when it comes to associating with her ex?
Yeah, and you know, as you say, this all happened in 2016, and here we are talking about it all this time later, airing their dirty laundry in public, as it were, British phrase there. But you do wonder, as you say, the motivation, where this all comes down to the Miraval wine estate. Kinsey, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for those updates.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Very good morning to Tom, who's messaged me to say, Keir Starmer opposes higher interest rates, which are meant to squeeze and reduce inflation. He thinks it's all about opposing, not coherent policies, just opposition from the leader of the opposition. Thank you for that, Tom, who also says, P.S. get your hair cut or you'll look like Mella.
A few people have been saying that to you, haven't they, Paul? You're going to get the hint.
What's wrong with looking like Mella? Or even we saw a picture of Brad Pitt there with long hair. That's the look I'm going for.
Okay.
More armpit than Brad Pitt, but, you know. 6:30.
We're going to keep a tally of the dad jokes that come out this morning. I love it. We're going to take a quick break. As you say, 6:30. After that, we'll go through the papers. Today, we're joined by Ali Miraj and Amy Cameron. See you in a sec.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:32. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning. The Prime Minister, for one, urging European leaders to act more quickly to end the reliance on Russian energy supplies. She'll be attending a summit in Prague later today. She'll also call for greater unity to combat the causes of migration and disrupt people trafficking gangs.
A new study suggests air pollution particles can reach babies in the womb. Scottish and Belgian researchers say they can be breathed in by expectant mums and cross the placenta through the umbilical cord. They say the findings are especially concerning because exposure is linked to stillbirth and disturbed brain development.
Research suggests the cost of living concerns could drive some pension savers into scammers' clutches. The Financial Conduct Authority says a quarter of people said they would consider withdrawing their pension savings earlier than planned to cover living costs, potentially making them vulnerable to criminals.
Okay, it's time to go through your Thursday morning newspapers. This morning, we're joined by the columnist at The Article, Ali Miraj, and the environmental campaigner, Amy Cameron. A very warm welcome to both of you. Amy, you want to start with the Prime Minister's speech yesterday. On the front of most of the papers, it has to be said, you've chosen The Guardian. She's highlighting a new common enemy to a fractured party. You see this as a bit of a construct, I presume?
Yes, I mean, so much about this speech was fairly bizarre, not least that it's being heralded as a success, I think purely on the basis that it didn't immediately tank the markets. But she conjured up this sort of new enemy of the anti-growth coalition, which, given that under her leadership in less than a month, Liz Truss's government have tanked the pound, they've seen mortgage holders thrown into absolute, panic, legitimate panic, which I think we'll cover later, markets in a tailspin, that I think anyone who's paying any attention to this will see that this is a desperate kind of diversionary, distractionary tactic.
You're
It's a classic
an
divide and
environmental
rule.
campaign,
Yes.
right? You're in the anti-growth coalition.
Yes,
how do you
apparently
feel to have been put in the anti-growth coalition?
I mean, to be honest, I'm in there with some quite inspiring names. So we included the unions in there, right? And I am more than happy to be put alongside working people who are coming together to campaign for better wages, better working
Just to
conditions.
clarify, you for or against growth?
For it, so such a good question. I do think we need to have a conversation about who and how growth serves us. So I think at the moment, and especially under this leadership, we're focused way too much on growth, which for the last 12 years has really only serviced the wealthy. So you will hear this from people who door knock, campaigners for both Labour and Conservative, right? That in the last sort of 12 years, even during periods of supposed growth, loads of people on the doorstep will tell you, I've not seen any of that. My wages have been stagnant for the last 12 years. Things have been getting tougher. So I think, one, we do have to talk about relentless growth as an economic strategy. I'm a climate campaigner, so you might expect me to say that. We need to have a conversation about that. But in the more immediate term, growth for who? I think is the question we need to be asking, because very, very few people in the UK have seen the benefits of growth over the last 12 years.
Ali Mirage, I mean, she did address that in her speech, didn't she? She wanted to grow a bigger pie so that everybody could have a bigger slice of it. And, you know, whether or not you accept that the anti-growth coalition is a construct or not, it could serve to unite a fractured party, could it not?
Well, it's not only the anti-growth coalition, Isabel, that she was taking aim at. She was taking aim at talking heads who come to TV studios. I know. Although I haven't come from North London, at least I come from East London, but I am a talking head. Look, the point about growth is an interesting one, because you've got Jay Powell in the Fed in the US trying to effectively induce a recession to calm inflation down in the US. And over here, we've got the Bank of England increasing interest rates to get a grip of inflation, which is close to 10% and set to rise further. And on the other hand, you've got the government trying to go in a different direction, try and boost growth, which will be inflationary. Now, the government say that because of the support they're giving to people with their energy bills, that is going to reduce inflation by 5%. I'm a bit sceptical about that. But fundamentally, as Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, said, you've got these things going in two different directions, government on one hand and the Bank of England on the other. So that's one thing I don't understand still. The other thing that I think Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng need to do to not only reassure markets, but also to get their plan back on track, is to explain how this these tax cuts that they're giving and all this additional borrowing that's going to take place to help people, quite rightly, with their energy bills is going to be paid for in the medium term. That is the fundamental issue.
They've got a plan for it, haven't they? And we still don't have a date for, an earlier date than November the 23rd. And there was some confusion over that.
There was. And again, that doesn't strike me as a government that's currently in control of all events. I mean, initially it was announced they would not move it before the November the 23rd, which is a long, long way away, to leave markets sort of wondering how this is all going to be paid for. Then it was being briefed that it would be brought forward. Then again, it's not being brought forward. So it's all a bit confused. I do think Liz Truss yesterday had a decent speech. I mean, the bar was set very low. I was at the conference during the week. It was a really awful atmosphere on the fringes. I mean, there were not many MPs there other than those on the government payroll. You had different ministers spouting off, giving a policy on the hoof. You had Penny Mordaunt talking about the benefits. That's going to be the next big inflection point for the party, the next big point of departure, if you like, in terms of will benefits rise with inflation or will they rise with average earnings? My view is if you're giving pensioners the triple lock, which is 2.5% average earnings or inflation, the higher of, so pensioners are going to get inflationary pay rise, you've got to be fair across the board to people at the bottom of the spectrum as well on benefits. So that's going to be the next big battle.
And actually, feeding into one of your stories you were talking about, there's some thinking that they're holding back on that to use it as political collateral with this kind of mini rebellion of backbenchers that are there, saying, look, OK, if you vote with us, we'll do what you say when it comes to raising benefits in line with inflation.
Well, look, it's going to be a fractious time. We've had Michael Gove, obviously, he was one of the protagonists, if you like, of trying
Staging
to
a coup, according to Suella Braverman.
Well, Suella Braverman also was interesting because she gave a really a lot of red meat to the right wing in her speech of the party, really positioning herself as controlling migrants, getting people off Benefit Street, all these kind of messages she was giving. The thing I was left scratching my head when I heard the speech, I was in the hall for Suella Braverman's speech, was, hang on, the party's been in power for 12 years, right? What is going on? 33,000 people still cross the channel this year. we've heard enough of promises. We want delivery. People want delivery. And if you're going to come up with something like the Rwanda plan, which I think is a bold initiative and I think it should be tried, you can't come out with these things unless you've rolled the pitch beforehand. I mean, Jeffrey Boycott would say it's not just about rolling the pitch. I mean, these people have left massive cracks in the pitch where the ball can turn and, you know, take the wickets off, right? I mean, this is what we're facing, right? It's not just about the comms. It's about the actual delivery and getting your ducks in a row beforehand by passing legislation, for example, to control the flow of migrants before you announce a policy, which is then falls flat because you can't deliver it.
I think that's
classic boycott.
Yeah. Sorry, that is not an impression I'm familiar with, but very good.
You were going, who's he talking about? I have no idea.
It doesn't matter. We just enjoyed it. Yeah.
It's still good. I got it, Ali.
Thank you so much.
I need to try and do an accent in the next round.
Yeah. Actually, and what Ali was talking about feeds into what you want to talk about on the front of the Mail, or on page 4 of the Mail, about mortgage interest rates.
Yeah, so
6%.
this is, yeah. I mean, and what I think is really interesting about this, so, well, interesting / terrifying, new mortgage rates now passing 6%, which they're saying is a 14-year high. That's only part of the picture, because actually the mortgage burden that people are facing is much greater than that. So the percentage of their income that will now be spent on mortgages is actually much closer to what it was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Around 25%.
Yes, which is huge. And at that time, that was just preceding a massive crash in the housing market. There's 2 million people between now and the end of 2024 will come to the end of a fixed term mortgage. So I think to Ali's point, you know, it's all well and good to have these sort of boosterist statements, but this is a reality that is facing countless homeowners across the UK, myself included. My mortgage comes to an end next June, I believe, which is it's pretty terrifying.
I was told by an estate agent that next summer could be a bit of an inflection point on this issue because there's this huge move of people post-pandemic or mid-pandemic wanting to get out of London in particular, buying new houses, getting these 2-year fixed terms, and they obviously come to a head or around then next summer. So who knows? But I mean, this is a serious issue, and whether or not it would have happened regardless of what happened with the mini budget is almost for the birds, because the way it's going to be viewed forever through history was with a great big stonking blue rosette, isn't it, with a Truss premium on mortgages, and she'll always be linked to that.
Well, I think it was just badly handled. The mini budget was ill thought through, and it was very, very bad, not only politically but also economically. You've got to explain, if you're going to be making tax cuts and announcing a top rate of tax going down, you've got to explain where these things are coming from. And also, if you're borrowing over 100 billion to help people with their energy bills, you again have to explain where the money is going to come from, because you're going to have to borrow that money in the bond market, and investors around the world who buy UK bonds actually need to feel comfortable that this is all the fiscal situation of the UK in the medium term is credible. And you see Fitch today potentially putting the UK on negative watch because it feels
so Fitch,
that
they're a rating
agency.
Yeah.
They're a credit rating agency that rate the UK government's debt. There are others out there as well. And they're basically saying that in the medium term, debt to GDP is going to increase. And that's the thing. Look, during the leadership contest, when Liz Truss was talking about her plans, Patrick Minford, her economic guru, was saying that interest rates would potentially go up to 5-6%, which is a much more normalised level. Fine. Historically, if you look at interest rates before 2007, they were 5.75% before the recession. So we've got used to very low interest rates for a very long time. The thing that upsets people is if there are dramatic increases they can't manage. I mean, if it's increasing over time, at least it's easier for people to plan. But look, we are going to be in for pain. That is
and that is a good point that our business and economics editor Liam Halligan's made repeatedly, which is that this is part of a long-term shift away from low interest rates and loose monetary policy, you know, quantitative easing, that kind of thing. So it's just a case of how you manage that move away.
Absolutely right, exactly right. And then I mean, if you look at what's happening in the Telegraph today. On the one hand, you're looking at increasing interest rates. On the other hand, you're also looking at the fact that despite the government's rhetoric on tax cuts, they've frozen the actual thresholds where people pay tax. So you're actually going to have a lot more people coming into the higher tax
fiscal
bracket.
drag.
Fiscal, yeah, it sounds like something that I have when I go to the toilet
exactly,
after a curry the night before. But anyway, the point is that it's a serious. Sorry, too much information.
Yeah.
It's a serious,
way too early.
It's a serious.
I think you're just the right side of 7.
It's a serious point. The Institute for Fiscal Studies is actually talking about the fact that this is actually going to. It's going to cost 21 billion by 2025-26. So whilst the government is effectively taking away 41 billion, giving you back 20 in tax cuts, you're going to be 21 billion worse off. So this is a serious problem as well. But they can't really change it at the moment because they need to convince investors in the markets they've got a credible plan to bring down that debt over the medium term, because you can't have a situation where your debt to GDP ratio just increases exponentially. I mean, Liz Truss has said it is lower than the G7 average. That is true, but it's still not a great position. I mean, remember when Margaret Thatcher left office? I mean, debt to GDP was about 20%.
It's also debt to service what? We're not borrowing to invest here. We're borrowing to give tax cuts to the wealthy, which I think that's what's making people's head really spin.
But they are doing, Amy, they are doing the bottom end as well, though. They are doing, like, they've reduced the basic rate for everyone, right, from 20 to 19, which is Rishi Sunak has said he would do in a couple of years' time in the run-up to the election. They've done it now. So it's not just the rich. I mean, I completely agree that 45p reduction was a disaster.
No, and you say it was scrapped, Isabel, which it was, but not before the damage was already done, right? It's actions like that, poorly thought out actions like that, which have caused this spike in market panic. So yes, that was withdrawn. I think there's still a lot of questions about how the tax burden is being levied. As Ali said, not only is it income tax thresholds, but things like benefits and child benefits. Those people are also going to be affected by this freeze. So I think it's the complete lack of joined up thinking. So one of the things I think is so amazing about what this government has done is brought together this completely bizarre coalition of people who are in opposition to the changes that are being made, right? I found myself yesterday agreeing with Nadine Dorries. I don't think I've ever seen the day. But they're affecting their core voters who are mortgage holders, and they're affecting people who are on benefits. It's just a bizarre coalition.
I'm not sure Nadine agrees with Nadine, because she said we need a mandate, but then in the evening I heard an interview. Yeah, she said actually I'm not calling for a general election.
Is Nadine the new poster girl for the left?
I don't know. I mean,
so I guess we'll wait and see.
Before we move away from conference, and in summary, what was the mood? I mean, you say a lot of MPs weren't there amongst the delegates. Do you think that if this medium-term fiscal plan, whatever date it might be, is, convincing enough, then they can stay the course as a duo, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister? Or do you think, ultimately, one of them will have to move on?
Well, Isabel, you can't have a situation where a party runs its leadership contest like the equivalent of the X Factor. I mean, every year you have a contest. I mean, this can't... It's got to
stop, yeah.
Got to stop, right? I do think that there was a division amongst... I spoke to a lot of delegates, actually. I think the mood was amongst a lot of them that we just need to get on with the job. Some were really in despair. A lot of MPs around, the ones who were there, were really quite despairing, a lot of them. And frankly, the mood was not upbeat. But I think there is that discrepancy, if you like, between the delegates who really want to get back behind her. And remember, 80,000 of them did vote for her, and they love tax cuts. But the reality is you've got to take the country with you. And at a time where people are really suffering and you've got unions out there demanding inflationary wage increases, you have to be fair and just across the board. You can't be being perceived to be just helping your rich mates on the one hand and dumping on everyone else. You can't do that.
Ali, you said not to run it like the X Factor, but I'm thinking that could actually be quicker. If you had Simon Cowell and a few other people and some red buzzers, and then you just put the candidates up there for 20 minutes, we'll do an hour show.
That'd be quite a good idea.
Buzzer if they like it, and then it's over, it's done.
But also a serious point, they do need to reform the way they choose leaders going forward, and Tobias Ellwood's come out saying that. I know Rory Stewart's not in the party anymore, but there is a groundswell of support for this, surely.
Well, the danger is, I mean, in the case of Liz Truss, she got less than a third of the votes of MPs. She only got 50 in the first round. So there is if you like, a divergence between the members of Parliament who have a certain view and the membership that have a different view, and they're not in sync, and that's the problem. You're always going to have that tension.
But surely the MPs have a stronger mandate because they've been elected by the British people rather than Conservative Party members who just pay to be, and there are only 80,000.
And elected on a manifesto. I think that's the thing that people are finding like so bizarre about this. And I know you've already spoken a bit about the Greenpeace protest yesterday. Who voted for this? She has no mandate. So in the past, when we've seen changes of leader, they have to some extent stayed at least within the parameters of what was agreed at the previous election. So take Gordon Brown, for example. You know, obviously changes need to be made as the context shifts, but no one voted for this. And I think that's
well,
what
they vote for the party. The party's still there. That's what the Constitution says.
But the party are backing
just because we've got a wrap.
right?
Just very quickly, moving on up or moving on out?
Yeah.
Up or out?
Time to break free.
Sideways at the moment.
Right, moving sideways. Up or out?
I think out. I'm going to go with out.
OK, Ali Mirage and Amy Cameron, as entertaining as I hoped you would both be, thank you both very much indeed. It's coming up to 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
So Keir Starmer is renewing calls for Liz Truss to reverse her budget as he warns families face eye-watering mortgage increases. Analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a £498 monthly hike if interest rates hit 6%.
Nurses will start voting today on whether to strike over pay. It's amid warnings that record numbers are leaving the profession. Around 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing are being asked if they want to mount a campaign of industrial action in the union's first UK-wide ballot.
Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face sexual assault allegations made against him by actor Anthony Rapp. Mr. Rapp claimed he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was 14 years old. The actor has categorically denied the accusations.
Now, supermarkets have been taking extra security measures to try and prevent theft as shoplifting continues to rise.
It comes as baby formula has been pictured behind the counter in Sainsbury's alongside cigarettes and alcohol to prevent stealing.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is the Communications Director for the Association of Convenience Stores, Chris Noyce. Good morning to you. I was reading about this morning. 1 in 3 admitting to shoplifting, with 63% of those saying this was due to the cost of living.
Yeah, well, that certainly does happen. But what our members are telling us is actually the main causes of shop theft are two things. They're people that are dealing with a substance or addiction problem, or they're people that are organised groups that are stealing to sell on. So yes, there are. I'm sure it does happen. There are people that are stealing because of the cost of living, but that is not the majority of what our retailers are seeing and what our retailers are telling both us and the police.
What can shopkeepers do then to beat this?
It's really tough. It's really, really tough. And the first thing we say always is people are more important than property. We know that shop theft and challenging shop thieves is the #1 cause of abuse for colleagues in stores. So we say don't necessarily try to intervene yourself, don't challenge, but absolutely report it to the police. And then they will deal with the most appropriate intervention. If that person isn't someone who's dealing with addiction, the intervention is not from the police. The intervention is rehabilitation and to stop repeat offending. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, whether it's custodial sentences, whether it's fines, whether it's rehabilitation, whether it's just helping people that are struggling. Stopping repeat offending is ultimately the goal, because that's what is a real problem for convenience store retailers and of course, supermarkets as well.
What we've been hearing is that some shop owners have decided against calling the police because it simply just takes too much time away from stacking the shelves, serving customers. The whole process slow, laborious, often waiting on the phone for long periods of time, waiting for that crime reference. And it's just having to go unreported as a result.
Yeah, that's something that goes across both theft and abuse, really. So, yeah, retailers on the phone for 45 minutes, an hour, waiting, as you say, just for a crime number, and they get fed up with it. I mean, lots of retailers are dealing with theft every single day, and, you know, it gets to a point where you think, do I have an hour to spend on the phone dealing with this? But the problem is you then get into a vicious circle where retailers aren't reporting it, and then the police don't think that there's as much of a problem as there really is. And then we just go round and round, and then what happens is the people that are stealing get more confident, they get more brazen, there's then theft with abuse, there's then robberies, burglaries, violence, more serious incidents, And then certainly the police will have to deal with that as it escalates. So if you can tackle the problem at source and, I know it's a pain, but try to report incidents when they happen. And I think we're all agreed that theft is a crime. It should be dealt with as a crime. And so we should encourage all retailers to report and all reports to be followed up.
Time for shopkeepers at the moment generally?
It's been a really difficult time. The retailers have had a real shock with energy costs, as I'm sure all the watchers on the programme have as well. But thousands of retailers were looking at whether or not they should be able to keep the doors open and the lights on over winter. The government's intervention on that has been helpful, but it's come as part of rising costs all across the business. And then when you put shop theft and abuse on top of that, it is an extremely difficult time for convenience retailers, but they do have the support and the help of their communities. And for a lot of reasons, that's why lots of retailers do it. They are embedded in their communities, and they are a force for good during difficult times like this cost of living crisis.
OK, Chris Noyce, good to get your thoughts this morning, Communications Director at the Association of Convenience Stores, on the rise of shoplifting. Thank you.
It is 6:55. Stay with us, because after the break we'll have more on Liz Truss's summit with European leaders. What's it called again? The European...
Don't put me on the spot. It's called the European Political Community. It's a brand new forum starting today in Prague. First of all, though, here's your Thursday forecast.
Morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south, initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss urges European leaders to work together on energy amid continued Conservative Party division.
A very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 6th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Prime Minister then using today's brand new summit of European leaders in Prague to call for unity on the issues of energy and migration in the face of what she's calling Europe's biggest crisis since the Second World War.
It follows a defiant party conference speech in which the PM reiterated her commitment to growth and vowed to defeat what she called the enemies of enterprise.
Ukraine's rapid advances could see it retake Crimea, according to a senior US official. Vladimir Putin said in a speech yesterday that he planned to stabilise the newly annexed regions.
And as BT workers walk out for another set of strikes today, we'll be speaking to the General Secretary of the Communications Workers Union as 999 call handlers now join the picket line.
A very good morning to Shirley, who says, I believe growth creates the funds to pay for our public services and servants, and we all benefit.
Julie says supermarkets securing baby milk behind locked glass doors is shocking. In times like this, they should be giving one a week free to families struggling on low incomes. Keep your thoughts coming in, be part of the conversation. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. So our top story this morning, Liz Truss will attend a summit of European leaders in Prague today with energy and migration all high on the agenda.
This comes after her keynote speech at the Conservative Party conference, where she hit out at what she called an anti-growth coalition who criticised her mini-budget.
Well, our political reporter Catherine Foster has the details.
Liz Truss arrived in Birmingham after a torrid first month in office. And for the first 3 days of conference, it only seemed to get worse. So her speech was an attempt to reset, to win over critics inside the party and out.
I have 3 priorities for our economy: growth, growth and growth.
The Prime Minister was interrupted by Greenpeace protesters asking who had voted for her changes. But it only seemed to unite members in the hall.
It's always more taxes, more regulation and more meddling. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
It's just a month since Liz Truss became Prime Minister, but already we've seen accusations of coups, cabinet splits, and even talk about Truss's very survival as PM. Will this speech be enough to turn things around? This is how it went down with members.
She showed she knows what she's talking about. She got them in her hand after about 5 minutes, and then she just grew and grew and grew.
I think she did very well, yeah. No cheese speech moments. It was really good. I was a bit worried, but no, I think she did a great job.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic, much better than I'd expected. Before I was a bit worried, but now I feel very reassured.
Birmingham has provided a platform for those who disagree with the PM. Her speech might help win some of them back. But as she scurried to Westminster, she will need to prove she has the strategy and steel to survive. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is live for us in Prague, the Czech capital. There he is this morning. Hiya, Darren. You've hot-footed it on a plane over from Birmingham, the Conservative Party hoping to draw a line under that kind of divisive, turbulent conference. And also, starting with this European political community, what is that?
Yeah, first of all, just on the internal politics that we're seeing back home, this is a really, really difficult period for Liz Truss. We've seen Dee Doris, former Culture Secretary in the Times newspaper today, essentially saying that she has not got a mandate for some of the radical policies that she wants to implement as Prime Minister, and suggesting that she needs to roll back on some of those if she wants to stay in power. It follows, obviously, Grant Shapps, a former Cabinet Minister as well under Boris Johnson, saying effectively that she had 10 days to sort all this out or she could be in trouble. So all those domestic problems at home are not going away, despite the fact that yesterday's speech was pretty well received, I think, by many within the Conservative Party. But you're right, Liz Truss is in Prague today at a meeting of what's called the European Political Community. It's this kind of idea being put about by Emmanuel Macron, who wants to kind of put Europe back at the centre stage of world affairs, and to have a kind of bigger grouping than the European Union. And I think one of the reasons the Prime Minister is here today, despite obviously Brexit, is because Turkey is here, Norway is here, lots of the Baltic countries are here, Israel is here, for example. So it essentially is a proper meeting of the whole of Europe. And I was speaking to the Prime Minister about this the other night, and she felt that where there were issues being discussed that were of big importance to the United Kingdom, that she needs to be there to be part of that conversation. And that is why this summit is focusing on migration, on energy security, and particularly, of course, the war in Ukraine. And President Zelensky, while again not being physically here in person, is going to address those leaders from across Europe remotely a little later on. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is also going to meet with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. She's going to have an individual meeting as well with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. And it is interesting, isn't it, these two issues. First of all, let's talk about migration. Within the last couple of minutes, by the way, it's been reported that up to 80 migrants may well have died of two boats trying to reach Greece overnight. And you have to remind her that obviously migrants don't just pop up in places like France. They travel through lots of Europe. And clearly the Prime Minister understands that if you want to sort out illegal migration into the UK, that needs wider European cooperation. And then when it comes to energy security, the UK at the moment trying to tie down long-term deals with countries such as Norway. They're here today. That's why it's important, because as she said in her speech yesterday, the UK cannot avoid what's going to happen this winter, i.e. having to rescue people's energy bills from happening in the future, and that means long-term energy deals with countries like Norway and elsewhere. So it'll be a really, really fascinating day, obviously post-Brexit, but as I say, the Prime Minister very clear that she feels that when these big discussion points are taking place, she needs to be at the table and be part of those conversations.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Appreciate it. Let's get some more reaction to all of that to the broadcast editor for The Spectator, Cindy Yu. And look, really interesting hearing what Darren was saying, explaining what this new EPC European political community actually represents in a kind of post-Brexit, anti-Russia world. And Liz Truss writing a comment piece in The Times today, specifically addressing how this is not Europe as it used to be. 1/3 of the people attending this meeting are non-European members. So how significant could this meeting be today?
So I think it's interesting notion of this new phase of our relationship with Europe. As the Prime Minister was keen to say, it wouldn't be like the European Union, very, very close-knit kind of economic relationship there, which had all sorts of implications for our kind of customs union, our trade with the rest of the world. She's thinking a much looser thing, but also something more predicated on security, on energy, on strategy, on things like illegal immigration. And so if we could handle that, if we could crack that, then, you know, we haven't left Europe, as it were. And I think that's her point, you know, she has to be at the table because we are still Europeans. And so I think if she can, you know, get this one right, it could be very, very good just to make sure that the kind of sourness after Brexit can be got over. And she said at conference that her remarks about Emmanuel Macron were just le banter. So I think, we're seeing quite a lot from the party, this kind of on purpose move towards describing the Europeans as our friends.
Yeah. I don't know if the European Union have commented on this European political community, but one would have thought if this goes well, if these talks go well, then will the European Union feel a little bit undermined?
I think the idea is that they're doing different things, because the European Union has always tried to kind of broach into these topics, but actually, people had questions about sovereignty, very legitimate questions about why, the European Commission should be able to dictate certain other aspects, like how many immigrants like Greece takes in, for example. There were always question marks about that. It's important to note that this political community actually comes from Emmanuel Macron. He wants to head it up. This is his idea to become the kind of the Tsar of Europe, having Angela Merkel left the scene. Now Liz Truss is hoping that she can lead that. I think that would be difficult to wrestle this project from Macron's hands, but it has always come from a very kind of European Union perspective anyway, so I don't think that would be in competition.
Well, they're having a bilateral meeting today, aren't they? So it'll be interesting to see how much of Le Bant takes place during that. Try not to get the sick bucket. But in all seriousness, let's reflect on the last few days. Making her speech yesterday, it seems to be the consensus is there was a low expectation from it. With that in mind, she didn't do too badly.
Yeah, that's right. She didn't do any worse than she had when she went into that hall. So I guess that was good. And as you saw from Tom Harwood talking to these members who went to the hall, the atmosphere in there was relatively positive. I think she was still very, very stilted. She's still not a public speaker. And coming after Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, you really notice the difference. There were a few moments where she clearly wanted to say something for effect, wanted the applause, and then there was a pause when people didn't realise that she was going to... there was...
We had that with
atmosphere was quite
as
difficult.
well. It does make you realise what a performer Boris Johnson was, and all his crazy references where you had to sort of sit there looking up what he was talking about.
But at least he was fun. At least he was fun, and he was a good orator. But I don't think she is that.
Yeah, but there's still problems. Liz Truss is in Prague, but as Darren was saying, there are still problems. There are still divisions, at least on the backbenches.
Yeah.
Nadine Dorries today coming out and contradicting what she says, and a lot of industrial action on the way.
Nadine Dorries was, that's a full frontal attack. It's not even a backstabbing. Having, as I say, righted, kind of got everything back on track a little bit from the conference speech, nothing was worse. Barely 24 hours later, Nadine Dorries comes out with this full frontal attack saying that Liz Truss is going to lead them to historic losses. I mean, I think what's fascinating is who is she working for? Because Nadine Dorries, I don't think, has leadership ambitions herself. But she has always been a Boris ally.
Johnson
she has always
yesterday
been a
morning,
Boris ally.
and he was still claiming very much to back Liz. But whenever Boris Johnson, during his troubled and tumultuous months earlier in the year, went overseas, it exposed him to problems back home. The rebellions felt empowered, didn't they? Is there a concern then that a stage where her personal authority is in question, to be going overseas and leaving the Goves, the Shapps, the Dorries, but perhaps even members within her cabinet, the Mordaunt's, the Bucklands, perhaps could expose her further?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for these big beasts, it's like the leadership contest never finished. Because she barely had a time to bed in. And she's brought all these people into her cabinet, the others, she's kicked out of her cabinet, and she can't trust any of them, really. Who are her stalwart defenders in cabinet, like Nadine, the Nadine Dorries, the Jacob Rees-Moggs for Boris Johnson? She doesn't really have any. This is why you raise a really interesting point, because I think foreign policy for Boris Johnson was both a haven where he could be, projecting his power, projecting his charm. The whole Ukrainian support for Boris Johnson is
a global statesman.
Absolutely, but at the same time, as you say, all of that time at home, all the problems were bubbling. The whole Chris Pincher row started when he just got back from one of these international trips. So I think, you win some, you lose some, really. It's a difficult one, but I think she's only away for a couple of days, so it's probably okay this time round. But she really has to make this growth happen. If she doesn't, if it doesn't happen, then very, very difficult times.
Yeah. Cindy, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Cindy Yu from The Spectator. Liz Truss talking about that anti-growth coalition, which I think included people going on strike, unions, that kind of thing. And we're going to talk some more now about some more industrial action.
Yes, because thousands of BT workers will today go on strike due to a dispute over pay, including 400 emergency call operators, which I think is a really key, significant development with this story.
BT said it would do whatever it takes to protect 999 services by moving staff to cover emergency calls.
And our reporter Rosie Wright is at the BT Tower for us this morning. Good morning to you, Rosie. Tell us more.
Good morning to you both. Yes, I'm at the picket line at the BT Tower. This is the third round of strikes this year from the union who say we need more pay. We're expecting today about 30,000 of their engineers to go on strike and also 10,000 of the call operators, but crucially, what is different this time? For the first time, 999 call operators are also going to go on strike. Yet at this point, around 400 to 500 is what we anticipate. We can find out more about why and why this union have significantly, in their own words, upped the ante. Joining me now is Stevie Ward, who's General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union.
Good morning.
BT have said this strike is reckless. Why are you going ahead?
Well, look, let's talk about upping the ante. It's BT who are upping the ante all the way through this dispute. I mean, it cannot be right that call centre workers earning between £21,000 and £27,000 a year are having to go on strike. They're at a tipping point. The actual situation with BT is that they are refusing to negotiate. They've had 2.5 weeks' notice of this dispute. We would rather be in a room sitting with them today trying to get this dispute resolved than being out on strike. And that goes for all of our members. So it's BT who are upping the ante. And I have to say it's their levels of hypocrisy, greed and arrogance.
Let me just put BT's side across. They said in April we'll offer you a pay rise of £1,500, which they said for the majority was about 5%. For those on the lowest income, that was about 8% pay rise, the highest pay award that they've given out in 20 years. Why do you say that's not enough?
Rosie, can I say it's right that you hold people like me to account to come here today, but where are the CEOs of BT? They don't come out and explain their position. You put their position for them. And that's not true. They imposed a pay rise of £1,500 that was worth on average about 4.8%. But that come on the back of a pay freeze that they imposed last year as well. And with inflation like it is, people are really at a tipping point now. And all we're saying is surely your viewers and surely every politician in the country would be saying, why are we not sitting in a room trying to negotiate a resolution to this dispute?
I mean, BT have said that pay dispute for 2022 has now been closed. There's no room now for us to have further communication. So why do you think, they'll say they'll talk in communication, but they say the dispute right now has been settled in April. So why do you think this action, and involving 999 call handlers, is actually going to change anything and also might make you lose public support?
Look, let's be honest, BT, rather than negotiate, chose to use their managers today and train up agency workers to cover these roles. So they did that rather than refuse to negotiate. We could have suspended the strike if they'd have come to the table with fresh proposals. Why do we believe that they can afford a decent pay rise for workers? Well, they made £1.3 billion last year. They awarded shareholders over £750 million, and the CEO took a 32% increase in pay, taking his pay to £3.5 million. Now, you'll understand, against that background, why our members are so fed up of the way they're being treated with utter contempt. And I can't emphasise enough here that some of these workers are so important to society. We understand that. It's an incredibly difficult decision for them today. But why is it that these people at the top of businesses, it's like a disease up and down the whole of the UK, of arrogance, of greed, of hypocrisy. They should be in the room negotiating a solution to this dispute.
That's very clearly what you're asking. We can go back to BT and put those claims to them. I'm sure you're doing the same. Just talk to me to the public right now who might feel, I want absolute confidence that when I ring 999, there are going to be enough people there to pick up the phone. Are you worried that the public might say, actually, we supported these strikes, but this is enough?
Look, what I'd say to the public is that we gave BT 2.5 weeks' notice. We made an offer to them.
Anything new to say to the public? You haven't already told me.
What I'll say to them is that these the 999 calls are being covered by managers, are being covered by agency workers. And, you know, the public need to understand that the people who are out on strike today are exactly the same as them. They're people who are really struggling. They're going to food
How
banks.
much are you prepared to hurt the service to try and get a pay rise?
We don't want to hurt the service. We want to actually be in a position where our members can do that work with decent pay terms and conditions.
Dave, thank you very much for speaking to me. So the strike action will be taking place across the day, not just today, but also scheduled for the 10th, the 20th and the 24th of October. So there is much more of this to come. BT, as Dave has just said, have said they are going to supply those staff. So if you ring 999, there will be someone to make really clear who will answer the phone. I'll have more across the day for you here from BT Tower.
Good stuff,
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, do you remember BT's slogan?
No.
It's good to talk.
There you go.
Something to bear in mind when it comes to industrial relations, perhaps.
With the time at 7:18, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. So Keir Starmer is renewing calls for the Prime Minister to reverse her budget as he warns families face eye-watering mortgage increases. Analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a near £500 monthly hike in interest rates if interest rates hit 6%.
Speaking of industrial action, nurses will start voting today on whether to strike over pay. It's amid warnings that record numbers are leaving the profession. Around 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing are being asked if they want to mount a campaign of industrial action in the union's first UK-wide ballot.
Kevin Spacey is due to appear in a US court to face sexual assault allegations made against him by the actor Anthony Rapp. Mr. Rapp claimed he was the victim of an unwanted sexual advance at a party in 1986 when he was just 14 years old. The actor's categorically denied the allegations. Around an hour ago, we were talking about the rise of the golden gap year, those approaching retirement who've saved up and decide they're going to go travelling around the world. A few of you have been in touch this morning with your thoughts about this. Tony in Bury St Edmunds says, we took early retirement at 60 with private pensions, state pension kicking in soon. But have you checked the prices of holidays? £5,000 for 2 weeks away for us both. Sounds like it will be a golden gap year only in cost. According to Tony. Thank you for getting in touch.
Yeah, and Val in Maidstone's also, you've sent us a lovely email, Val, really appreciate it. I retired a year early in March 2020, only to be locked indoors. My husband Doug and I were going to see lovely England first before travelling further, but the pandemic stopped all that. Then, just as life was getting back on track, my lovely hubby became ill and passed away.
Oh, no.
Now, because of a story on your show, I'm about to be a puppy raiser for the Guide Dog Association.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which is amazing.
Oh, well, I'm incredibly sorry to hear about your husband, Val, and just so unfair. I suppose that's a reminder then, if you can, go and see the world. Obviously Val couldn't due to the lockdown, but those of you considering golden retirement,
and
you never know.
Yeah, and interesting to know whether you'll take maybe that puppy with you on your travels, Val.
That's a nice idea around England.
Yeah.
Look, we're going to be back after the break. Paul Coit will be in the studio. He has all the big sports stories of the day, including why the boxing match between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn will not.
There will be no fighting.
ahead.
There's not going to be any fighting. Here's the weather.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland, dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly, we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south, initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 7:25. Still to come on the programme this morning. He's covered benches, buses and telephone boxes, and now Britain's dullest man is back with a new calendar highlighting, wait for it, village notice boards.
As I've said before, it depends what's on the village notice board. Okay, we'll find out all about that at 7:45 and at 8:20. Was Liz Truss's speech at conference enough to bring the country behind her? We'll ask a public speaking expert how he thinks she performed, and of course we want to hear what you thought about her speech as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
I've got a bone to pick with Philip, who's just emailed in on dull calendars. He says, can we have one with GB News presenters on? How rude! How rude! Quite funny though.
Can't personally speaking, I can't disagree with him on that. Certainly if I'm holding up November.
You'd like to be in contention.
Yes, indeed.
OK, look, keep your thoughts coming in, keep them polite, and we'll read as many as we can throughout the course of the morning.
Yeah. Right, let's speak to the most exciting man in sports broadcasting. Paul Coyte joins us now. Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's very interesting. I love the idea. I love the idea of the notice board calendar.
Yeah?
Oh, it'd be great. There's going to be things that you could brief stuff you don't spot.
Well, you don't know what's on the notice board.
You never know what's going to be on the notice board.
Yeah, that's an automatic assumption. It's going to be boring because it's a village notice board. The automatic assumption means that rural life is boring and less exciting, I think.
Yes.
It's countrysideist.
Yes. I'm nodding off now.
Indeed. Now, what are you laughing at? Right.
Erling Haaland, that's what you want to talk about.
Erling Haaland is ridiculously good at football.
He is ridiculous. 28 goals in 22 Champions League games. He's just the first one to reach out of 30, to score 30 goals in the Champions League now at his age. I mean, the question is is whether he actually is a human being. He's unbelievable. He just scores for fun. And the thing is, he only played in one half of the game. So it's Man City 5, Copenhagen 0, and the first half he scores 2 goals. It would have been his 4th consecutive hat-trick as well at the Etihad. And so it's like, well, that's what he does.
He's tall, he's big, he's strong, he's powerful.
He's got
a good
everything.
touch.
He's got everything.
He's like 3 strikers in one, isn't he?
Yeah, there's got to be some flaw in this. We just can't find what it is yet. 19 goals in 12 now. So it's just whenever he goes out and plays, he scores goals. And not only that, he's a great footballer as well.
Yeah, and he seems like a nice chap.
Oh, God, I hate him for that. He's got everything.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Chelsea, they played AC Milan last night. That's normally quite a tight affair, quite feisty.
You'd think so. I mean, AC Milan, they're the Italian champions, and Chelsea, you've got Graham Potter now as the new manager, and under Tuchel, it wasn't working so well. They were at the bottom of their group as well in the Champions League. But you can't argue with that. 3-0. It was a fantastic result. Played really well. And then they've got AC Milan again, because this is almost like a double-header part of the Champions League group stage.
Next week.
So that'll be next week.
Next week.
So
And the Tick lost 3-1?
Yeah, Leipzig 3, Celtic 1. Now, I thought Celtic played pretty well. I thought they did pretty well. But the thing is, I think the turning point, or if we could call it a turning point, it's 1-1. And Leipzig had a goal disallowed. And the Celtic fans went crazy. They got very excited about it. It's almost like when it gets overturned by VAR, it's almost like you've got a goal yourself when that happens. Yeah. So all the Celtic fans are celebrating. Joe Hart then dribbles the ball out, passes the ball, what on earth he was thinking, then back to them. And then they go and score on the other end. And then it goes to 2-1 and then end up losing 3-1. So, I mean, Joe Hart, you just think an experienced goalkeeper like that. Few clangers as well in his career, but not good. But 3-1, you know, it's Europa League, I think, the Champions League, I think even the hardest core Celtic fans will realise that probably the Champions League is going to be over for them. But now they've got to keep doing well and then get that 3rd place, and then they can qualify for the Europa League, which they did well in.
Ben Eubank is not happy.
Oh, my goodness.
The fight.
Well, I don't know whether it is or whether it isn't, because it shouldn't happen. Conor Benn has tested positive for a banned substance. Now, it was VADA. Now, this gets very convoluted, so stop me if we get lost in the middle of all the intricacies of this. So VADA, which is the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association. Yeah. He was tested whilst training, and he was found that he tested positive for something called clomiphene. Now, clomiphene is used as a fertility drug for women, which you would kind of think often when you get athletes testing positive, it's like, well, yeah, it was a diet pill. It was something, it was a nasal spray. It was for something like this. But clomiphene, why would he be using it?
Must be hormones in there. Something hormonal in that.
It boosts testosterone in men. That's what it would do, which then increases strength and it increases endurance. So you would look at that and think, well, he's got to be banned for this. Now, there's 2 tests. They have to have an A test and a B test, which is the urine test, which comes from the same test, but there's just 2 bottles. So the A test tested positive, but the B test still hasn't been tested yet, but it still comes from the same sample.
Okay.
So we're still waiting to see what the result is. How am I doing so far?
You're doing great.
Does it make sense to you?
All I know is that you told us a couple of days ago that Eubank Senior, who recently lost one of his other children, didn't want the fight to go ahead.
Correct.
So from that point of view, I'm quite happy that this
You know what, Isabel? The thing is, you know when you have things in life and you think, it almost feels that this isn't supposed to happen. Yeah. Something is working here against me. And so this is the second thing. So there was the thing about the catch weight situation, whereas Eubank Jr. was having to lose a lot of weight for the fight. So that's happened. Now Ben has tested positive. Now, whereas you would think that there's a positive drugs test, where the British Boxing Board of Control have declared the contest, their words, prohibited and not in the best interests of the sport, which makes sense. But there's going to be lawyers involved. There's a huge amount of money involved.
Let's
we're
wait
talking
for the B sample.
Tens of millions of... So we're going to wait for that. Now, it was VADA. Now, VADA, they tested it, and UKAD, who are the UK Anti-Doping Association, when they tested him, the test was fine. So... although it really would be probably in the best interest of the sport for the fight not to go ahead because he's tested positive for a banned substance, there's still going to be ways that this can go ahead. Now, there was also a fight that recently happened, whereas it wasn't sanctioned by the British Border Control. So what they did, this was David Hay and Derek Chisora, they went to the Luxembourg Board of Control, who said, we'll sanction it for you. So the fight could still go ahead, sanctioned by someone else.
In
Honestly,
Luxembourg, I don't know.
It's such a tangled mess at the moment, and we're only 2 days away.
You're getting two fights for the price of one, the legal fight and the actual fight.
You know what? The bell is going to go on the legal fight, and that's...
more money.
You know what? And we know what that is.
Yeah,
So
again, the lawyers are the winners.
The lawyers are the winners. There's lots of people that are going to see the fight, and although it's said that it's probably not going to go ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually does.
I think the gloves are going to come off in court.
OK.
Right. 7:30.
Honestly, how many more boxing jokes?
7:33. Thanks, Paul. Cheers. 7:33, serious news face. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with Ali Mirage and Amy Cameron.
Yeah, see you in a minute.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It is 7:36. Time to go through the papers this morning. We're joined by the columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage, and the environmental campaigner, Amy Cameron. Welcome back to both of you. Ali, we want to start with the Daily Mail front page. Defiant Truss takes fight to her critics. Did she do that in her speech?
Well, I think she got through her speech. It was a business-like speech. It was very direct. It was quite short. It was quite punchy. It was obviously there was a disturbance from Greenpeace protesters. A little bit rude. I think the point they were making was around fracking. I think, which Liz Truss is in favour of, but there are other ways of doing that. But I think she got through it, and I think it was okay. It was a fractious few days at party conference. I was there. The mood amongst the MPs that I met was sort of in part despairing, in part defiant, depending on who you talk to. And members wanted to get behind their new leader. I mean, 80,000 of them did vote for her, and they want her to do well. So she took the gloves off, saying she was going to combat the anti-growth coalition. She was going to combat people who, and I quote here, prefer talking on Twitter to taking tough decisions and take taxis from North London townhouses to certain TV studios. So, look, I think she laid out a vision of what she wants to do. The question is that she's got issues coming down the track. She wants to be opening up immigration as well to try and increase growth. Now, that's going to be at total odds with someone like Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, who in her speech was talking about reducing immigration to the tens of thousands. She wants to reform planning laws. How's that going to go down in the southern Tory Shire seats? She wants to talk about looking at benefits and not increasing them in line with inflation. How's that going to go as well? So I think she's got problems still to come.
Yeah, it was interesting. I heard Henry Newman, one of Boris Johnson's closest aides, and indeed a great friend of Carrie Johnson, on the radio yesterday, and he was talking about how the Truss administration is actually finding that when you're actually making the decisions, it's often a choice between a difficult decision and a terrible decision, and how hard it actually is to govern.
Yeah, but to be fair, she says that she's the person when it comes to making tough decisions, unpopular decisions, and she carries it through.
But to what end? I don't... These decisions have been so...
Amy, where have you been?
Growth. But I think this is the thing that I'm finding intensely confusing. I was never expecting to like Liz Truss's premiership. It was never going to be my bag, right? But we assumed, theoretically, that the markets would be positively responding to this, or at least members of her own party. I think what I find so interesting about this is defiant Truss takes fight to her critics. Her biggest critics right now are her own MPs. So the left have been able to stay perfectly quiet the last few days as former ministers, current ministers, members of her own cabinet have come out on media rounds to criticise her. So I think the problem at the moment is that it's like whack-a-mole with Liz Truss critics right now. Everyone from the markets to... We had loads of people who were benefiting from the top rate tax cuts, saying they felt uncomfortable with them. Her own ministers. Who's behind?
But to be fair, the markets have settled. The pound has recovered. And they'll hope to... and they'll hope to draw a line under this now and kind of move on, and providing there's no dissent... You
can't make an omelette without breaking any eggs.
But what I don't understand is there was no policies in that speech, right? You can't build a... Maybe during a campaign you can build something purely on pointing out who your enemies are.
But what she needed to build yesterday was morale and unity. Policy has already been outlined in the mini-budget, and now she's got to work out how the medium-term
policies been outlined, though?
Well, either way, yesterday was more about trying to stop
rally,
the party falling apart, would you say? And do you think she was successful in doing that, Ali?
I think, look, it was a terrible week for the Conservatives, so I think that speech did enough for now. But look, the real test is going to, as Amy sort of alluded to, when Parliament returns next week, when some of these things have to start be putting to votes, where I still think, you look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying that effectively, because they've frozen the actual tax thresholds, that people are going to still be worse off. 21 billion is going to be taken out of the economy because of those tax thresholds that have been sort of made static, not increasing with inflation. So I still think there are a number of questions. Yes, the 45p rate the reduction of that was abolished, and that calm things to a certain degree. I think that was a crazy move to suggest that. But you still have massive borrowing to help people with their energy bills. And you've also got a reversal in national insurance and a scrapping of the increase in corporation tax. And lest we forget, that we did spend 400 billion on COVID, and this money has to be paid for from somewhere. It's either going to be tax rises, which she's ruling out, or spending cuts. That's going to be the real crux of the issue. Where is spending cuts going to land? And how are Tory MPs going to react to it? If it's not going to be on welfare, where is it going to be? She still apparently wants to cut the welfare bill by 7 billion. Where are those cuts going to hit?
There can't be more governmental efficiencies. We just can't keep...
Well, they've been in power for 12 years, Isabel.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, difficult message.
Before we move on from the Conservative Party woes, Ali, you chose the front of the eye, and the reason I wanted to reflect the eyes because they picked up on our interview with the Foreign Secretary yesterday, in which he was unable to clarify when this medium-term plan would be, and it just shows that within the cabinet, there is disarray. What is their front page saying about all of this?
Well, the eye is basically saying cabinet rebellion growing, and this is around the whole benefits thing, particularly. I mean, we already know about the U-turn on the 45p rate. It wasn't really a U-turn. It was a sort of a handbrake turn at the Nürburgring, to be honest with you. That's how severe it was. It should have never been suggested in the first place. It was ill thought through. And what these people need to do is they need to surround themselves with some sensible heads in Downing Street that allow them to look around corners and see potential problems and pitfalls that are occurring. The problem when you have government being run by think tank ideologues is, yes, you get a clear direction of policy, but you also then need to sell that policy and make sure that it's practical and that it doesn't hurt the very poorest in society. So I think there's going to be more problems down the track. You've heard already from Penny Mordaunt saying that benefits should potentially rise with inflation. Even other members of the cabinet indicating the same thing. You can't have a free-for-all. There has to be message discipline amongst the cabinet, and the Tory party MPs are going to have to hold it together, because you can't keep changing a leader in the equivalent of the annual X Factor competition. I mean, it can't work like this.
Yeah.
Isaac Levido was sacked yesterday by Liz Truss. He's the campaigner party credited with the 2019 Tory election landslide. And was that a bad decision, do you think, from Truss?
Well, I just heard from you that Isaac Levido is one of Linton Crosby's protégés. Linton Crosby worked very closely with Boris Johnson, and indeed Mark Fulbrook, who's chief of staff now to Liz Truss, is again, we don't know if he's a protégé of Linton Crosby or Linton Crosby is a protégé of him. He argues that Linton is a protégé of him. But anyway, they all work together. Isaac helped win elections. He did secure that 80-seat majority with Boris. So, look, Liz has obviously got to have people around her she trusts who are on board with her view. But I think it's been really difficult. She's got a minus 59% approval rating right now, worse than Corbyn would ever have. It's a really long way back. And the problem is, Isabel and Paul and Amy, is that when you have a situation where you lose your reputation for economic competence, you are in trouble. Remember 1992, Black Wednesday, when Britain and sterling had to leave the exchange rate mechanism? The Tories never recovered. It was 5 years later and they got hammered. I just fear that we may have reached an inflection point. I hope I'm wrong.
Although I would say after that there was a decent economic recovery following our crash out of the ERM.
Which they didn't benefit from, Paul, at the election.
Which they didn't benefit from. This time, though, it's looking... The situation's looking worse. And, of course, inflation is the enemy pushed up a lot by energy, which both of you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, Amy, you've chosen the front of the Times on it.
Yeah, to talk about, plea for European help against blackouts.
Yeah, so this obviously is in the thread of conversation around oil and gas and the soaring energy prices, which are also being matched by genuine concerns about shortages. Obviously, the first irony to be pointed out here is this is a plea for European help from Liz Truss. I think it goes without saying that we have not done our relationship with our European partners a huge number of favours in recent years. I think there have been attempts, actually, I will say there have been attempts under this administration to speak more warmly about some of our European neighbours.
Including today in Prague.
Yes, exactly. So I think there is some degree of an attempt in recognition of the fact that the crises that we face are global ones. So the thrust of this story is, firstly, that she today will be speaking to European partners upon whom we are very dependent around interconnectors. So as well as energy that we kind of buy in terms of liquefied gas, etc., we also have interconnectors with Norway and with France that supply electricity and power to us from their hydro predominantly in Norway, and obviously we've got nuclear in France. There is a suggestion at the moment that some of those interconnectors may be shut off for periods of time. And Ofgem have warned that there is a substantial risk of gas and power shortages this winter. I think what this speaks to, one, of course, is the importance of international relations when it comes to these major global crises. We need to be friends with our closest neighbours and allies. The other is that at the moment, Truss's energy plan is purely based around this covering of the costs, right? So capping, to some extent, capping energy bills. But we have seen nothing in terms of demand reduction. So we do recognise that we need to shift away from oil and gas. I think pretty much everyone has agreed with that. And yet the energy plan that Liz Truss has laid out has done nothing to support us in that, either in incentivising people to reduce their own, to reduce their own demands, nor to address the fact that the UK has the leakiest housing stock in Europe. So huge amounts of money that we spend on energy, on electricity, just wafts out through our walls. Now, obviously, these are slightly more medium-term plans, but surely at a time when we're talking about basically funneling huge sums of money to energy suppliers, we should at the same time be talking about how we roll out a programme of energy efficiency so we wean ourselves off these sources of energy in the long term and cut bills forever, right? Like the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. And we haven't heard anything about that from that as of yet.
Yeah. Ali, can you have an energy strategy without purely talking about the supply side?
No, I don't think you can. I think Amy's absolutely right. I do think we need to be changing the culture in this country around demand, not only around energy, but also around water. And I think to Amy's point as well, you've also got to be able to deal with baseload power. When you do with renewables, I think renewables are great. They're also very cheap now, wind and solar. The wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine. You've got to invest in baseload power. That means nuclear. I'm glad that the government's finally signed off on Sizewell C and Hinkley Point C. The issue with nuclear is it takes a long time to build. It's often over budget and over time in terms of delivery. It's a 10-year sort of time horizon. But you also need to build more interconnectors. I mean, I was in one of the fringe meetings at the Conservative Party conference. There was a lot, actually, of discussion around environmental issues all over the place. It's a big part of the conversation. One of the things coming out was build a lot more interconnectors, even to places like Africa and other places, so we have a much more flexible energy system and network, but certainly demand is part of it, and that requires education. But what Liz Truss did say during the leadership hustings was there would be no blackouts this winter, so we have to believe her because she said it.
Yes, believe in trust. OK, listen, I have to say something to you both that I hope no one will ever say again, and that is we have to let you go because we've got to make way for Britain's dullest man. Ali Mirage, Amy Cameron, thank you both very much indeed.
It is, you can't wait for that, can you? 7:48, let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
Sir Keir Starmer is renewing calls for Liz Truss to reverse her budget as he warns families face eye-watering mortgage increases. The analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a near £500 monthly hike if interest rates hit 6%.
Nurses will start voting today on whether to strike over pay. It's amid warnings that record numbers are leaving the profession. Around 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing are being asked if they want to mount a campaign of industrial action in the union's first UK-wide ballot.
At least 15 people have died in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Lesbos. The country's Coast Guard says it's the second maritime disaster involving migrants since Wednesday. The boat was carrying about 40 people, with 5 being rescued so far.
From roundabouts to rubbish tips, benches and footballer Jack Grealish's calves, our next guest has been dubbed Britain's dullest man after creating a series of calendars shouting out the mundane.
But Kevin Beresford says he's honoured to be called dull, and as he releases a new creation about, wait for it, village notice boards, he says we should all start appreciating the ordinary. And he joins us now. Very good morning to you. I'm very pleased you don't take offence at this, because I must say I was worried about saying this in front of you. But you see it as a badge of honour.
It is indeed a badge of honour. Dull is the new black. Now it's sexy being dull.
But can you clear something up for us, Kevin?
Yes.
People have been saying that your village notice boards calendar is dull, but I put it to a lot of people this morning that it depends what's on those notice boards.
That's correct, really. The more I approach these boards, they change constantly. Somebody out there keeps replenishing them. I thought nobody bothered with these things, but now it's a different kettle of fish. They really are interesting. There's one village notice board down in Sanborn, which is just down the road from me. They do a half-hour version of Richard III, Shakespeare's Richard III. Half hour? It must be for people stuck with a bit of time, I don't know. But things like that really tickle me.
How do you find your dull subjects? I mean, I was reading that your next proposition is Anorak of the Year, which, makes a lot of people glaze over. But for you, that's exciting. How do you choose?
I've already won that accolade a few years back. So all the dull men now are meeting up in Wales on the 15th of this month. We're all going to be grouped into one room. So that should be pretty exciting, shouldn't it? All the dull men of Britain. And a few women,
just writing the date in his diary.
When is that? When is that, Kevin? And I will...
That's the 15th of October in Llangollen.
Right, yeah.
We're going to be presenting a lady with the Anorak of the Year. So that's
okay.
A lady.
Do you know, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, if you think about it, Kevin, because you're calling yourself the dullest man in Britain, but these are things you are interested in. So to you, it's not dull, or is it the fact that you find the dullness interesting, if that is even a thing?
Yeah, I referred to the meeting of the dull men. It's amazing how charismatic they all are. I was expecting them all to be as dull as dishwater. It's the opposite. It's just that their hobbies are dull, that's all. I mean, look at Rod Stewart. He's a rock star, albeit an aging one. He's got a train set up in his loft, hasn't he? Which he takes all around the world with him. So it's just the hobbies that are dull. It's not the actual dull men and women. It's just their hobbies.
Yeah. So what do you actually find really dull then? Too dull for you? Is there anything that's too dull for you, or do you find curiosity in everything?
No, I'll be honest with you. I find soap operas dull. I can't watch soaps at all, you know. But some people find that absorbing. So that's my point. It's whatever rocks your boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the variety of life, isn't it? Other people, I mean, I find football incredibly dull. So whatever it is that floats your boat.
Jack Grealish's calves.
Well, I probably wouldn't object to taking, you know, some appreciation of calves. That's a different matter. But look, I love the fact you established yourself as president of the UK Roundabout Appreciation Society, your unofficial title being Lord of the Rings, and the founder and only member of the Car Park Appreciation Society. Might I point out a beautiful car park to you, designed by my mum, no less, in Woking Town Centre, which is a very pretty car park. If you want to add that to one of your calendars, have a look at that.
Okay, I'll have to get down there and have a look at that, because I'm also the president of the Car Park Appreciation Society. The only problem with that, I'm the only one in it.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. You must. If you're the Lord of the Rings and the president of the round, you must hate Milton Keynes.
Well, Milton Keynes, no, I don't hate it. I love it, but it's more quantity. Milton Keynes is. Yeah. You got a lot of quite uninteresting roundabouts, if there's such a thing. But Basingstoke is much better. They've got amazing roundabouts in.
What makes them amazing?
Donut City, isn't it?
Yeah. What makes them amazing? The roundabouts.
It's what goes on them, really. I mean, that's the beauty of roundabouts. There's nothing more expressive than the one-way gyratory. And I've seen fountains, statues, trains, boats, planes. You name it, anything can go on a roundabout. And that's what makes them so special. They're like an oasis on a sea of tarmac. They lift our sagging spirits on long, tiresome journeys.
Yeah.
There's nothing more expressive than a one-way gyratory.
Yeah,
I've heard it all.
Yeah, genuinely interested, Kevin. What does your family think of this? I don't know if you're married or not.
No, I've had 3 very successful marriages. Each one have been a rip-roaring success. But I'm single now. But my 4 sons are a bit embarrassed by it all, I have to confess.
Yeah.
Oh, bless. Well, I'm sure they're secretly proud of you. And as you say, putting the sexy into dull. Dull is the new black.
I don't think you're dull, Kevin.
Be careful there. I'll get kicked out the Dull Men's Club.
I think you're really, really dull, Kevin. How's that?
Thank you.
We've had an email from one cheeky viewer, Philip. He said, can you come up with a calendar of GB News presenters? But I think you'll struggle to find any dull ones on there. Perhaps present company accepted.
I'll keep that in mind.
Kevin, really good to talk to you. Really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us, and keep us up to date with like your next dullscapades, if that's a thing.
Dullscapades, good stuff. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you this morning. Look,
My pleasure. Thank you.
Do you think dull is the new sexy? Do you think he's a little bit mad? Let us know your thoughts. Lots of views coming in this morning on a whole range of subjects. We've been talking about the economy. Please, when you have visitors parroting tax cuts for the rich, remind them that throughout Tony Blair's time in office, the top rate of tax was only 40%. So 45% is still above that.
Yeah, on Liz Truss, John in Blythe Valley says a bizarre politician, a populist actively seeking unpopularity. You couldn't make it up. Another says the unions won't be happy until everything is nationalised, but we tried that already. Of course, BT staff taking industrial action today, and nurses voting whether to strike or not as well today. More problems for the government.
Yeah, stay with us. We'll be back after the break talking about mortgages and the rest of the day's news. See you in a second.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so The stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
The Prime Minister urges European leaders to work together on energy amid continued Conservative Party division.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 6th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Paul Hawkins. Here's what's making the news this morning.
Liz Truss will use today's brand new summit of European leaders in Prague to call for unity on the issues of energy and migration in the face of what she'll call Europe's biggest crisis since the Second World War.
It follows a defiant party conference speech in which the PM reiterated her commitment to growth and vowed to defeat what she called the enemies of enterprise.
Ukraine's rapid advances could see it retake Crimea, according to a senior US official. Vladimir Putin said in a speech yesterday, though, that he planned to stabilise the newly annexed regions.
And health fears on the rugby field as a new study reveals that players are 15 times more likely to develop motor neurone disease. We'll speak to the former Leeds Rhinos captain who was forced to retire at the age of 27 following severe concussions.
And as always, we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Get in touch the usual ways. You know how. Email us or tweet us. So our top story this hour, and Liz Truss will attend a new summit of European leaders in Prague today, with energy and migration all top of the agenda.
This comes after her keynote speech at the Conservative Party conference, where she hit out at an anti-growth coalition who criticised her mini-budget. Our political reporter Catherine Forster has the details.
Liz Truss arrived in Birmingham after a torrid first month in office. And for the first 3 days of conference, it only seemed to get worse. So her speech was an attempt to reset, to win over critics inside the party and out.
I have 3 priorities for our economy: growth, growth and growth.
The Prime Minister was interrupted by Greenpeace protesters, asking who had voted for her changes. But it only seemed to unite members in the hall.
It's always more taxes, more regulation and more meddling. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
It's just a month since Liz Truss became Prime Minister, but already we've seen accusations of coups, cabinet splits, and even talk about Truss's very survival as PM. Will this speech be enough to turn things around? This is how it went down with members.
She showed she knows what she's talking about. She got them in her hand after about 5 minutes, and then she just grew and grew and grew.
I think she did very well, yeah. No cheese speech moments. It was really good. I was a bit worried, but no, I think she did a great job.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic, much better than expected. Before I was a bit worried, but now I feel very reassured.
Birmingham has provided a platform for those who disagree with the PM. Her speech might help win some of them back. But as she scurried to Westminster, she will need to prove she has the strategy and steel to survive. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, joining us now to bring us the latest from Prague is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, hot-footing it over there from Birmingham, much like the Prime Minister, Darren. Tell us about this meeting today, because it is an inaugural meeting of this new group, including a third of leaders who are not in the European Union, like us.
Yeah, indeed, it is the first time the European political community, as it's been branded, has met. It's kind of the brainchild of Emmanuel Macron, the French president. And as you say, it is 44 countries in total, way beyond the 27 that are clearly members of the European Union. And they include not just the UK, but countries such as Norway, Turkey, many of the Balkan countries, Azerbaijan, even Israel, though there are 2 notable exceptions, of course, to that. They are Belarus and Russia, and that is because it is security, the war in Ukraine and migration which are going to dominate this summit a little later on. We're expecting Liz Truss to be here at around midday local time. Let's take a few of those in sequential order, shall we? First of all, energy security. Really interesting that Norway is here, for example, Isabel, in the sense that what the UK is now looking at doing is trying to sign some long-term gas deals with countries such as Norway. So as Liz Truss, as she suggested in that speech yesterday, doesn't end up in the same situation it's found itself this winter, with little energy security and having to bail customers out effectively because of those expected high prices when it comes to gas and electricity. Then you look at the war in Ukraine. There is a real resolve across Europe to carry on supporting Ukraine. Indeed, President Zelensky is going to address leaders remotely again a little later. But Liz Truss saying that Europe is facing its biggest crisis since the Second World War, and we have faced it together with unity and resolve, and that continued commitment to Ukraine. And then migration, again, really, really interesting. Not least of all because we believe that up to 80 migrants may have died overnight trying to get to Greece. And it's a reminder that even though there's that small boat crisis in the English Channel, migration is a problem across lots of Europe. It's a problem that they've been grappling with for many, many years. And frankly, the Prime Minister, when I spoke to her the other night, made the point that it can only really be dealt with international cooperation, not least of all with France, and she is going to have another meeting with Emmanuel Macron later, with the Dutch Prime Minister as well. Even speculation she could have another meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President. So it is an interesting, first foray into this new kind of European political community. Many people felt a little uncomfortable that Liz Truss was coming here given Brexit. Her argument is that she needs to be at the table, be part of the conversation when those issues that matter to Britain are being discussed. And she's even suggested, Isabel, that the UK could host the second summit in London.
Interesting.
Interesting times. Darren, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, we'll keep you across what is happening in Prague today throughout the day here on GB News. But let's bring in the local government editor for Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs, who joins us in the studio. Morning to you, Harry. We'll talk about what's happening in Prague in a moment. But first of all, how do you feel about the conference and about where Liz Truss is now following that speech yesterday?
Oh, I thought that it was a very good speech. She's obviously had a tough act to follow in that Boris Johnson's got this bizarre kind of superstar charisma. So in terms of the delivery, the tone, she was never going to compete with him. But in terms of the substance, I thought it was very clear, and it would have reassured people who thought with the retreat over the 45p tax rate, was the clear, firm, radical free market agenda of lower tax, less regulation, smaller state, was that going to be abandoned, or was she going to carry on with that? And she couldn't have made it any more clear that she was going to press on with that. So I think that has now cleared up any doubts people might have had about her determination, I would say.
OK, so it was a good end to what was a rocky first conference for her as Prime Minister.
Yes, and I think the big challenge is timing, of course, isn't it? Because she said that she doesn't mind being unpopular, but of course that's fine for the short term, but you've only got 2 years. And so in some ways it's more of a challenge for her than it's been for previous Prime Ministers like Margaret Thatcher, who obviously did some very unpopular things, but tried to get on with it earlier. And that does mean that Liz Truss is now under quite a bit of pressure to speed along with this, to give it a chance to work in time. That's how she'll be judged.
As Paul said, we're going to talk about this meeting of the European political community, its first ever meeting in Prague, in a minute. But I just want to ask you on the thought that when there are problems at home within a party and indeed within a cabinet, when the leader goes abroad, it's often a vulnerable time for them. We saw that with Boris Johnson, didn't we, in the final weeks of his premiership. Do you think Liz Truss needs to be looking over her shoulder as she flies to Europe for the next couple of days with everything and all the dissent and disarray back home?
Personally, I don't. I think she needs to now get on with the policies that she's made clear that she wants to deliver. And I don't think that the Tory MPs will have any appetite for ousting her or voting for having another leadership contest. There might be some who are pessimistic about whether the policies will succeed, and others who will be more confident. But I think even the pessimists would probably accept that now, having been chosen as the leader, that she has to get on with it. So I think some of the stuff about coups, plotting, there may be people who would like to do that, but I don't think that they have a realistic opportunity. So I don't think she should be too distracted by that, no.
And just how worried are you about these interest rate rises, the effect they have on mortgages, on homeowners, for the country and also for the politics?
Oh, I think that it's very damaging, and it's inevitable, really, because of the huge splurge in spending during the pandemic, which you could argue if we were going to have a lockdown, it was necessary to compensate people. But that meant that a lot of that was paid for by quantitative easing, the Bank of England sort of creating pretend money and then giving it to the government. So, of course, that goes through inflation. And then if you get high inflation, then inevitably interest rates go up. So I think that's really what we need to do is get inflation down as soon as possible, and then we can get interest rates down. So I think it's going to be a painful time. I think the only glimmer of hope would be that there might be that we have these higher interest rates for months rather than years.
Well, look, all of that obviously inextricably linked with global security, the situation in Ukraine, particularly when it comes to interest rates and energy supply. They're going to be top of the agenda at this fascinating newfangled meeting that's happening in Czech today. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect to see. It's said to be the brainchild of President Macron, but Liz Truss will be keen to establish herself front and centre there.
Yes, and I think it's actually quite an opportunity in terms of the argument over Brexit, that because we're an independent nation now, it's not the same as being an isolationist. And a lot of the arguments against Brexit, the Remain argument, was that we were trying to be little Englanders and cut ourselves off from the world and all the rest of it. And I think this is an opportunity for Liz Truss to go along and say that Britain is still fully engaged in the world. Ukraine, obviously, is a huge factor. And there, of course, we're in a strong position that we were ahead of the European countries, and arguably not being in the European Union gave us more flexibility, more independence, because the European Union started to have a thing called the Common Defence and Security Policy, where they try and do everything by consensus, and that is slowed down in many ways their help for Ukraine. And crucially, before the Russian invasion, months before, we were providing the supplies and providing the training. And obviously, history could have turned out very differently if we hadn't led the way there. So I think she speaks with some authority, actually.
Harry Phibbs, local government editor for Conservative Home. Good to get your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we were just talking there about interest rates, which of course are on the rise. In fact, the mortgage burden, the percentage we spend on our repayments, is heading for the highest level since the late 80s. So that is accounting for what we spend as a household, things like credit cards, shopping, etc. Not just comparing like-for-like interest rates. But at the moment, interest rates on a typical 2-year fixed-rate mortgage, they've reached 6% for the first time in 14 years. So, this is clearly going to be a problem for, as Harry was saying, hopefully months, but some of the experts are saying years.
Yes, well, let's speak to an expert now. How will this be affecting our monthly payments? The property expert, Russell Quirk, is on the line. Good morning to you, Russell. Look, a lot of people really worried about this, and they've got good reason to be. Give us your assessment of where we are as a percentage of our repayments when it comes of our household income when it comes to our mortgage repayments.
Yeah, so the analysis this morning is that the cost of a mortgage as a percentage of our income has now gone up to 30%, which, sounds pretty high and indeed is higher than it has been. So we've been hovering around kind of 25% for a while. But of course, we've been rather spoiled, I would say, with almost artificially low interest rates, really, for the last 10, 15 years or so. This mortgage is at 2 to 2.5% that we now think is normal, really is not. If you look back in history, typically a reasonable mortgage level in interest rate terms is about 5 or 6%. And of course, some of us can remember 20, 25 years ago or so when mortgage rates were in excess of 10%. We shouldn't forget also, though, Isabel, that the average renter pays about 45% of their income on rent. So 30% sounds high, but there's a context here where actually in the scheme of things, it's really not that high in comparison to renters and certainly in comparison to what it could be. The question of interest rates, though, what we're making a bit of a fuss today, and we'll do over the next few days, of course, about the fact that fixed rate mortgages have increased in value or increased in cost quite a lot, and they have. But what we need to understand about the mortgage market is that they price their products what's called the swap rate. And the swap rate in the last 10 days or so obviously started to increase because of pressure on the pound, because of the reaction by the markets to quasi-Quatern's speech, and therefore the swap rate has increased. That has already, and here's a bit of reassurance, that has already started to reduce significantly. So the good news is that in the coming weeks, not months, but in the coming weeks, the mortgage lenders should now start to reduce their fixed rate products, so the cost of those mortgages, in line with the fact that wholesale mortgage rates have already started dropping. If they don't, it will mean that the lenders, a bit like the energy companies, are simply rinsing the public and increasing their margin and taking advantage of this current situation. Let's hope that that doesn't happen.
To clarify, if they do drop them over the next few weeks, will they only then have to put them back up if the base rate goes up in November?
Yeah, if the base rate does, but and obviously that will be in response to what Andrew Bailey and the Bank of England decide to do to tackle inflation. Of course, they have one job, basically, the Bank of England, which is to try and keep inflation at 2%, which I think is a ridiculous and now arbitrary target. I think the thoughts of Liz Truss, her statements in recent weeks where she was going to change the Bank of England's mandate, I think I know she's got other things on her plate right now, but she needs to think about doing that. And of course, with inflationary pressure, the fact that we're now going to have this energy cap, which kicks in very, very soon, whereby the average household won't pay more than £2,500 no matter what the cost of energy does. The experts are saying that that in itself will take between 3 and 4 percentage points out of inflation, and therefore that reduces the pressure on the Bank of England having to increase interest rates in the coming weeks and months.
But hope. Sir Keir Starmer saying he wants to see a reversal of the budget because the families face eye-watering mortgage increases, quoting around $498 hike per month for mortgages as their 2-year fixes ends, assuming that interest rates are at 6%. I mean, that's an awful lot for an average household, an extra £500 a month on their mortgage.
It is, and as I say, that will now start to come down. We also need to remember that the government of the day a few years ago introduced a thing called the MMR, which was it was effectively the mandate to lenders that they have to stress test their borrowers when they're underwriting new mortgages. So for the last few years, whenever you've been granted a mortgage by Halifax, Nationwide, Santander or whoever, they've already dialed in these increases to ensure that people that currently hold mortgages can afford them. The other thing that, of course, is true is that about 70% of people right now are on fixed rate mortgages. So they won't be affected at the moment by any of these increases whatsoever. So that's the majority of the mortgage market, whether that's investors, first-time buyers or whoever. The majority right now, their rates are fixed. So by the time they come off that fix, whenever that is, depending on that individual, rates should be certainly significantly lower than they are now.
Would your advice be then, Russell, that in the next few weeks, providing mortgage providers drop their rates before November to get in there and fix maybe a 5-year fix, given that we're on a long-term trend away from low interest rates and we're not going to be looking at, 1, 2, even 0.5% anymore?
Yeah, possibly so. I think, look, definitely don't fix today or tomorrow, as I say, because those rates are likely to come down in line with swap rates already having reduced. So yes, I would kind of keep my powder dry for a few weeks and then certainly think about a shorter term fix than 5 years, because I'm, as you can probably tell, a bit of an optimist here. I think that in the long term, interest rates will go back to some version of where they've been over the last few years. So maybe not down to 2% mortgages, but maybe we'll see 3 to 4% as normal. So I wouldn't go fixing at 5-year terms, because of course that the rate that you'll do that at will be higher, but certainly wait a few weeks and then look at 2-year fixed rates, which I suspect will be back down at kind of 4 to 4.5% sometime fairly soon.
Curious where you see all of this impacting the housing market itself. I mean, estate agents will tell you that it's been incredibly quiet in the last few weeks. Then there's been a bit of a flurry of people trying to secure mortgages before they think that they, in the last 10 days or so, thinking they're going to go up. You're now predicting that they'll come down. I mean, are we going to see a housing crisis? Are we going to see repossessions, or are things going to settle down a bit?
The last time we saw significant repossessions was when interest rates did go above 10% and people simply handed their keys back because they couldn't afford that burden. We're nowhere near that level, Isabel, nowhere near that level. There's a lot of doomsters, a lot of kind of pub bores, as I call them, kind of being rather gloomy about the housing market. They assume that there's this seesaw effect where if there's some interruption to the status quo in the housing market, and whatever that might be, and of course we've seen Brexit and the pandemic and so on, where lots and lots of experts trotted out and said that there'd be a house price crash and there'd be a reduction in house prices and values and so on. And of course, all of those so-called experts were completely wrong, and I think they're wrong this time too. There's simply generally too much demand. There's too much cultural cultural effort on the part of people in this country to want to buy property. And I also think that the government would always intervene because, when you've got a government that's that has as its strapline keeping Britain moving, then clearly if there was an issue in the housing market in the future, this government will do exactly what the previous one did, which is to intervene either with a stamp duty holiday or something. So I don't buy into house prices dropping. Will we see house price growth dilute? Yes, but I bet money, to be honest, that if we're sitting here talking in 12 months' time, house prices will not be lower than they are today.
You heard it here first. Thank you very much, Russell. Really appreciate your time this morning. Cheers, mate. That is Russell Quirk, property expert. With that advice, he's being an optimist.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to hear that voice.
Well, it is, yeah. And it's easy to get stuck in a negative mindset.
Yeah.
You just got to kind of balance it up, really.
Yeah.
So
trying to keep it real and see what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
All sides of the coin, as they say. Look, we're going to take a break. After that, we're going to dissect the Prime Minister's speech with a public speaking expert. But first of all, here's your all-important Thursday forecast.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland, dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly, we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south, initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:25, still to come on the programme this morning. At 8:45, we'll be talking to the former Leeds Rhinos captain, Stevie Ward. Really fascinating story. He was forced to retire from rugby early after he suffered several concussions. And we'll be talking about new studies which have found a link between sport and motor neurone disease. Really worrying.
Yeah, and interesting to hear from those of you who play rugby, have played rugby. Maybe you've got kids or grandkids that, you know, play sport, play rugby. Does it worry you, or do you think, it's a load of old nonsense, just get on with it? As the Prime Minister travels to Prague to meet with EU leaders, I would also talk about that. Speaking of which, at 9 a.m, we'll be having a word with the chairman of the Conservative Party, Jake Berry, about what it means for Truss and the future of the party.
And as always, we love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual ways. Email us, tweet us. I've just seen we've got a whole long list of responses to our interview with the dullest man in Britain. I'll read you some of those just as soon as I can. Go on then.
So, all right. There's been mixed reviews about Liz Truss's speech then, after she addressed fellow Conservatives at the party conference yesterday. From her speaking style to her body language, let's get a reminder of some of her memorable moments.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace. In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets. I would legislate immediately to make sure that we are standing up to militant trade unions who stop ordinary commuters getting into work. And I would legislate to protect our essential services. I have 3 priorities for our economy: growth, growth, and growth.
You can see the evolution there, can't you? From just like looking at the camera and then going to a bit more fluid.
Yeah, could say that. Let's talk about it some more with somebody who's a proper expert in all this, a public speaking expert, Chris Arning. Very good morning to you. And look, we should point out, this isn't about policy, this isn't about politics, this is singly about public speaking. And she has admitted herself that this is not her forte. And I sometimes feel a bit mean when we analyse and, you know, dissect somebody when they've already admitted it's a weakness. But do you detect any signs of improvement since her pork market cheese debut?
Well, yes, it's a good question. And she's admitted herself that presentation skills isn't her strong point. I think that certainly her conference speech from a rather modestly low level is definitely an improvement. She's still hammering the jazz hands a little bit. She could be a bit varied with her gestures. But in terms of delivery, she used some nice rhetorical techniques like the law of 3, we believe in, we're the only party of, we're the only party to. She used those gestures and those rhetorical techniques, which I think established things.
Funnily enough, I thought she was at her best when she ad-libbed. You know, when the protesters came in and she cracked a joke, she seemed to relax and she went off the cuff and it seemed to get the best response from the crowd. I sometimes think perhaps she's so inside her own head and being so heavily criticised from left, right and centre and afraid to put a foot wrong that she doesn't actually relax into it and let herself present herself in her best way.
Yeah, I think that's probably true with her. I mean, I think earlier clips of her when she was a Lib Dem show her being quite emphatic, sometimes almost recklessly so. And I think that's one of the issues with Liz Truss is that her predecessor, Boris Johnson, there wasn't any distance between his personal brand, who he was as a person, and how he showed up on stage. That was Boris. He was someone that, you know, unreconstructed public school boy. He said what he thought. And where he got in trouble, it was because people felt that he wasn't abiding by the rules. But to the wider country, he was a rule breaker, a maverick, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people warmed to him.
Yeah, well, we've actually got a clip of Boris Johnson. I don't know if we can play that now.
And in fact, it's the first time since the general election of 2019 when we finally sent that core-droid communist cosmonaut into orbit where he belongs. That's what happens. That's what happens if you spend a year trying to argue with Lord Frost. the greatest frost since the Great Frost of 1709.
He's clearly a big fan of the alliteration. I would say, though, there have been moments where he didn't come across very well speaking in public. I'm thinking of that speech where he turned up and he didn't have his notes and he was talking about going to Peppa Pig World. And
Yes,
I mean, did he bluff his way well through that? Do you think? Or
I think he did, Paul. And I think part of that is because he is known for being a sort of bluff, bumbling figure who can get away with it, essentially. The thing with Boris is even when his notes aren't there or whether he's lost track, he manages to keep the app moving and almost look endearing. Whereas with Liz Truss, there's this sense that when she pauses, it's not a dramatic pause, it's because she's sort of struggling to remember what she's been
Well, it's funny you say it because I've interviewed her twice, and just before we start recording, she's very congenial and relaxed and natural. The second the camera comes on, that's it. Yeah. I've got to think about my lines, and the defences go up a bit. And I guess when the defences go up, you don't connect as well through the camera.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think she's had a few deer in the headlights moments, and one of them, obviously, those car crash, widely regarded as poor performances on the radio last week, where there were a number of essential kind of micro glitches, you might say, where she literally seemed to not know what she had to say.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, that erodes credibility. And whether you say presentation skills are your forte or not, as a political leader, you will be judged on your oratory ability to convey your ideas clearly and inspiringly.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you, is how much does it really matter? I mean, it didn't appear to matter during the leadership contest, because let's be honest, Rishi Sunak was by far and away the most polished of the two. And in fact, it was used against him, wasn't it? It was accused of being too polished, too smooth. And I thought that was extraordinary that in a job interview that you could be accused of that. And now she's being dissected for not being polished enough. I mean, you can't win.
Well, haters are going to hate, aren't they? I mean, people are always going to criticise you, and that's part and parcel of being in the public eye. I mean, I would say, yes, that this idea of being sort of a plain-speaking person is something she could maybe play on a bit more in terms of her persona. But unfortunately, there are times where it comes across as a sort of composite of choreographed sound bites, spin doctor suggestions, and sort of hackneyed phrases.
Yeah.
I mean, she did use alliteration yesterday, texting on Twitter, taxiing to townhouses, enemies of enterprise. So she's punching things up a bit. There's just this sense that this has been put together by advisors, and it doesn't come from her sort of heart, in a sense.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? You were talking about gesticulation earlier. She doesn't do that thing that a lot of politicians do, which is that instead of pointing, because that's seen as quite confrontational, isn't it? Yeah. They were taught to do this, but now they're all doing this, like a kind of rain movement.
Like kind of maracas.
Maracas, that's the better. Yeah, she doesn't do that.
She doesn't do that. She tends to either have her hands on the lectern or doing this. I shouldn't call them jazz hands, but they are kind of emphatic gestures. She could vary those a bit more, because if you do that too much, it just looks like you're a bit hysterical.
I mean, you see it with reporters when they're doing pieces to camera, and we used to talk about how you mustn't point to your private parts, because that was a classic at journalism school. They was like, stop doing this.
Really?
Sure.
But you've reviewed hundreds of hours of big, famous speeches.
Yeah.
For you, who's the best orator of all time?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, obviously, the classics like John F. Kennedy, his inauguration speech in 1961 is widely regarded as one of the best speeches of all time. 1963, Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. But, I mean, if I was to say in the US, for example, I don't think Barack Obama and Donald Trump are both, in their own way, both very good speakers. Whatever you say about their politics, and obviously people have their views, I think with both of them, you absolutely believe that there's no distance between their personal brand and their speaking style. And ultimately, if your viewers would like to invite your viewers to think about this in terms of like advertising and products, is your speaking style is the advertising for the product. And as a political leader, you need to make sure those are absolutely in sync. And with those two, they are obviously appealing to very different bases. And with Liz Truss, there's too much of a sense she's a career politician and her speaking style is sort of grafted on or bolted on. And that's a problem.
She needs to get the brand, she needs to get the style to match the brand.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Chris Arning, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Public speaking
Pleasure.
expert.
Yeah, really good to get Chris's thoughts there. It is 8:35. After the break, we're joined again by Ali Miraj and Amy Cameron to chat through what is in this morning's newspapers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Time to go through the papers now. We're joined for the final review of your papers this morning with the columnist at The Article, Ali Miraj, and the environmental campaigner, Amy Cameron. And I should say, I learned this morning, Amy, you are a fully qualified vet.
That is
you
true.
You decided not to practice.
Yes,
I thought was an interesting
completely underusing my veterinary qualifications.
Well, on that note, let's talk about the Tory rebellion. Front page of The Express. Amy, stormy days ahead, but I've got your back, says Truss. Is she using her qualifications to the best?
I know, I'm trying to think of a link, but I've got nothing. Yeah, I think so. This obviously, we've been talking lots today about Truss's speech. And I think, like lots of the speeches that politicians make, you have to kind of look to who it is they're really speaking to. And I think what this headline prompts for me, both from Truss herself and also from The Express, is whose back does Liz Truss have at this point? So we have to remember that this is a woman whose election, her run for leader of the Tory party was half of her funding came from city bosses. Even after the scrapping of the scrapping of the 45% tax for wealthy earners, we're still in a situation where the tax cuts that they announced in the mini budget are benefiting the top 5% 40 times more than the bottom 20% in terms of income. So bottom 20% are looking to gain about £90 a year. You're getting 40 times more than that if you're one of the top 5% earners, even after getting rid of that top cap. So I think what this headline prompts for me is whose back do you have? Because at the same time as unveiling all of these theoretical growth measures with the idea that this will increase the pie, grow the pie, which is an expression we have all wildly overused this week. But at the same time as she's doing that, she's hitting out with the unions. Now, what I don't understand is in a world where even if best case scenario, the economy is growing, if we are not allowing workers to come together to demand that they get their share of the pie, if that is seen as being problematic or not in line with the kind of the thrust of this, I don't understand how any of this works for the vast majority of us. Like, again, the point I made in the last round, who is this growth for? Whose backs does she have? I think that's what this headline really prompts for me.
Ali, can you make sense of it for us?
Well, look, I think Amy makes a very interesting point that for me, one of the things, and look, I'm on the centre-right, has been the lack of any discussion around inequality, actually. I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, on the front page of the Times, it says, U-turn or face election wipeout, Truss warned. Now, who's warning this? This is Nadine Dorries, who is one of Boris Johnson's arch cheerleaders. She's actually been saying that you should not be cutting to curb benefit increases in line with inflation for the poorest in society. Not to do that, not to increase them, is cruel and unconservative. And she's also saying that Liz Truss is going in a direction where she has no electoral mandate, and she's jettisoning a lot of the Boris Johnson platform and abandoning the centre ground, allowing Keir Starmer to occupy it. But I really do think that the Tories need to be also thinking about inequality. Now, Liz Truss's argument would be, in response to that, well, I'm trying to help everyone. I've reduced the basic rate of income tax from 20 to 19 pence. By supply-side reforms, we'll increase growth. Growth and encouraging people to get jobs is the most secure way of ensuring prosperity. But I still think that if in a capitalist system, if you've got a situation where those at the top are accruing more and more of the benefits in society and others feel completely left behind, you're in a situation where, to quote Tracy Chapman with her old song, talking about a revolution, you're going to see people rise up and fight back against the system. And I think that's where, for me, the compassionate conservative element that was being talked about for so many years has been lost. And these people are fighting the battles from Thatcher's time 40 years ago. We're in a different environment now. You can see this in the strike action that's taking place, that people aren't roundly condemning strike action. Look, I think strike action's deeply unhelpful. I think there are other ways of doing this. I don't believe in inflationary pay rises, but it's very difficult to argue against that when you're giving pensioners an inflationary pay rise. And you're saying to people at the bottom of the spectrum on benefits that we're not going to to do the same for you.
She's more M people than Tracy Chapman.
Not according to M people.
Moving on.
Well, not according to...
M people are livid.
Yeah, they are. But, we had all that with Trump, didn't we? A lot of people objected to this music that he would use, and, that's life. But on the point of the U-turn, the mood music that I'm reading with Liz Truss is certainly that, she's trying to claim she hasn't decided yet. I think she has decided. I don't think she is going to push ahead with a real terms cut on benefits, because she just knows that's going to be the final nail in the coffin for her. Well,
that's right. And I think the Cabinet, some members of the Cabinet, you heard Penny Mordaunt already coming out in a Fringe meeting talking about it. The Cabinet's not really been singing with one voice on this. But it's not only benefits that Liz Truss is going to have problems with her own party on. You've got Suella Braverman talking about reducing immigration to the tens of thousands. And the Times has got a piece here saying, Braverman at PM at odds over Indian migrants. Now, on the one hand, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, and Liz Truss want to open the door to immigration, not only for fruit pickers, but also for highly skilled professionals to come over and boost the economy. They realise that, I think, in their heart of hearts, that on the back of Brexit, that has had an effect on growth. And on the other side, you've got people, a lot of voters who voted for the Conservatives in 2019, particularly in the Red Wall, who wanted higher wages and lower immigration. It wasn't just about controlling immigration. It was very clearly about reducing the numbers of people coming into the country. And that's very much this is what Braverman's talking about, the Home Secretary. She's in that camp. Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng in the other camp. So these things have to be done. And then you've got planning reforms with increased wind farms. Well, how's that going to go down in Tory heartlands where they're very worried about erecting wind farms on green spaces?
So migration is going to be a tricky issue for Liz Truss. Also, Amy, though, it is a tricky issue for Labour. Labour have the same dilemma there as well, because they don't want to be seen to be soft on immigration, but equally, businesses do need a more fluid labour force.
To be honest, Labour this week have come out with some statements on migration that I really don't think are helpful at all.
Like what?
I mean, so they also basically said they don't think we're deporting enough people. Now, one, I think electorally that's stupid, because if what you do is reinforce the fact that it's a problem with this, then obviously the Tories are always going to outmaneuver them on that. So I think it's stupid strategically for Labour to try and go hard on migration. I also just think it does not match the mood of the country. Now, that is not what you necessarily would see reflected in papers like The Express or The Mail. But actually, post-Brexit, people's concerns about migration have absolutely nosedived. So I think it used to be something like 40% of people thought that immigration was bad for the country. That's way down to around 20% now. Most people think migration is either neutral or broadly positive. Because there was such a hype built around it being problematic, and then people were told it was addressed, actually people have largely kind of moved on from that. So I am not impressed by Labour on this. I think we need to start talking much more positively about the role of migration and then stop pitting migrants against workers, because in reality, the people that are being exploited are all of us, right? We're being exploited by bosses. That's who drives down wages. And the people that fight against that are people like unions, who, again, we've been absolutely castigating. But they bring together British workers, migrant workers, to call for better for everyone. So I think the migration stuff has been unhelpful from Labour. I mean, it's even worse, obviously, from Suella Braverman. But we need to start having a much more informed conversation about migration, which actually reflects the mood of the country.
But Amy, just on that point, I understand the point. And look, businesses are suffering out there. They can't get access to labour. You can see that in restaurants. You can see it in the 100,000 vacancies we've got in the NHS. But fundamentally, one of the issues around Brexit and the reason why people voted for it, and something that Boris Johnson talked about when he was PM, is a high-wage, high-skilled economy. That requires investment, and it requires businesses across the board not to get hooked on the cheap labour, the opium of cheap labour that they've had for so long. Now, I know that in the medium-term period, you have to be sensible. You have to gradually try and bring it down over time whilst not crippling business. But in the longer term, you need to reskill your population.
Absolutely.
You need to have lifelong learning, and you need to increase wages as well to try and attract people into some of those jobs. You need a balance here.
No, I totally agree with that. I think the point I'm making is that we use migrants as a scapegoat for far wider, systemic problems around the fact we don't invest in our workforce, around the fact there's very poor adult education, there's a lack of housing, our NHS has been stripped out. And for far too long, the right and the Conservative Party, and I think often at points the Labour Party as well, have used migrants as a scapegoat, as a distractionary tactic to take attention away
political risk
from the real
to challenge
issues.
the rhetoric. It is a political risk, isn't it, to challenge that way of thinking.
We're thinking around migration.
Yeah. If that's what you're saying, that the Conservative Party, Labour, that people, if that's the thinking on migration, challenging that is a big risk.
But if Labour can't challenge that narrative now, when they have a sort of 39-point lead, then when will they? This is a time, I think, for bold statements around what kind of country we want to live in. And I just think that we're arguing for the same things, Ali. I think proper workers' rights, proper investment in our people, and also treating migrants with respect and dignity and working with them to fill gaps.
All I'll say, Amy, on that one, to round off this point, is to say, look, Labour needs to reconnect with voters in the red wall that left them, right? And they know that, on one hand, this is why Labour has been pretty stum about the whole Brexit thing and not opening up that whole wound again. They're living with it. They're saying we've just got to make Brexit work for us now. And on the same thing, on immigration, they need to tread very carefully, because a lot of those people in the red wall did want to have higher wages and did want to have the actual numbers of people coming into the country go down. Now, over the longer term, we might think that's not a good idea, but that's why I think Labour is being very careful with it.
I just think that what they wanted in terms of the results of that were around housing, were around healthcare, were around better wages, and I think talking about migration in the context of that is a red herring.
Okay. I want to talk about energy now. Front of the FT, talking about reconnecting. OPEC have been accused of aligning with Russia by the United States. What's this all about, Ali?
Well, this is basically the US taking aim at Saudi Arabia with OPEC for reducing the output by 2 million barrels a day of oil. And what they're saying is that they're effectively aligning with Russia, because this is going to increase the oil price. We know that there are midterm elections happening in November in the US. President Biden is under a lot of pressure in those midterms. He actually has managed to get some key legislation through Congress, to be fair to him, both the infrastructure bill and also the Inflation Reduction Act most recently. But it is a serious problem, and that is going to increase tensions at home in the US. But also it plays to a wider thing about how this war is actually going to be playing out now. It looks like the Ukrainians are making more gains. It may shift it in the medium term, but still in the short term, there is a lot of economic pain to come. Energy prices are still high, and that's why they're desperately trying to get OPEC to increase production to try and dampen down the oil price.
Thank you so much, Ali and Amy. Thank you both for going through the papers with us this morning. Really appreciate it. And of course, if you want to feed back to us on anything our guests had to say, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
I think there'll be a few. I think there'll be a few thoughts on some of those issues. Let us know, as we love to share as many as we can. 8:49. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. So Keir Starmer is renewing calls for the Prime Minister to reverse her budget, as he warns families are facing eye-watering mortgage increases. Analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a £498 monthly hike if interest rates hit 6%.
Nurses will start voting today on whether to strike over pay, with amid warnings that record numbers are leaving the profession. Around 300,000 members of the Royal College of Nursing are being asked if they want to mount a campaign of industrial action in the union's first UK-wide ballot.
A new study suggests air pollution particles can reach babies in the womb. Scottish and Belgian researchers say they can be breathed in by expectant mums and cross the placenta in the umbilical cord. They say the findings are especially concerning because exposure is linked to stillbirth and disturbed brain development.
It is 10 to 9. We're going to talk about the effects, the neurological effects of playing rugby now, because figures from the Rugby Players Association show that players are 15 times more likely to suffer from motor neurone diseases.
Well, the disturbing findings come as regulators World Rugby welcomed the call for an elimination of contact training and a reduction during matches.
Study also found that former Scottish internationals were at just over twice the risk of developing dementia and 3 times at the risk of Parkinson's.
Well, for more on all of this, let's speak to Stevie Ward. He's a former Leeds Rhino captain who was forced to retire in his 20s after suffering 2 head injuries back in 2020. Welcome to the programme. Great to see you. Just on your personal story, first of all, I think you were just 27, weren't you, when you decided you had to step away from the game, even though you're absolutely smashing it in the world of rugby. A really difficult and upsetting decision for you, but your health just had to come first, fundamentally.
Yeah, I had to make that choice and make a decision to step away. I was 27 and probably coming into my prime physically and as an athlete, you know, and I had that opportunity to lead a team for the rest of my career. And I'd literally just had a teammate, an ex-teammate of mine called Rob Burrow, who you might have heard of, who got diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And, you know, I set off on the path to win and to bring more success back to Leeds in Rob's name. And I picked up the concussions and ended up retiring with post-concussion syndrome, which is obviously symptoms that I still struggle with today.
What are those kinds of symptoms, Steve?
Headaches, dizzy spells, nausea, migraines, and the confusion, you know, your sort of mental health, anxiety, and real sort of it coincides with leaving the game as well, you know, so leaving the job, the life that I've always had, and it's not easy, you know, it's not easy, and it's been a tough old couple of years.
Sure, because playing rugby was what you love more than anything. But I wonder, in the context of how you're feeling now about it all, do you regret ever having picked up a rugby ball?
I don't regret it. I think it's just been who I am since 6 years old, you know, and I've found a lot of love through that game, and it's literally been a way for me to build leadership skills, to connect with people, to have amazing opportunities, and also it's been, you know, it's hurt me a lot of the game. You know, I've had a lot of injuries through it, and I've had a lot of trauma. And the concussion is sort of something that I'm still dealing with now. But, you know, I think it's put me onto a journey which is even more important. I think it's even more important where we've got to look after each other. And I think also right now, I think the message is for players to take up some responsibility and to control what they can, you know, within this current climate, which is worrying, it's scary, and it's hard. It's hard to navigate, you know. As a player, you have to be invincible. You have to sort of just be single-minded. But we've just got to be doing the things that we know that we can do to make sure the science improves and to make sure that we're looking after each other better.
Is there a way then to play rugby in a safer way, do you think, going forward?
I think we just have to reduce contacts, you know, and I think that means by playing less games, building the games up better. I think less contact time in training, You know, I'd used to make 40, 50 tackles on a Friday night, and then Monday back in training, I'd be doing the same again in a padded room. And I think you build all that up over the course of a career, and it's a lot of concussions, a lot of sub-concussions. And then also there's some science that's entering the game now. There's gum shields which monitor load, monitor impact, and these gum shields have been used to monitor the G-force, but also the type of rotation, the type of movement that your brain does. So we can actually try and get figures for which are the worst impacts, you know, and that can sort of give us the scientific backing to understand the rules that we need to change, the sort of the collisions that we need to avoid, and the stuff in training that we need to stop doing as well. So again, that's another a call for players to take this up and to understand that from where they are, whether we like it or not, we are sort of guinea pigs now. The more research is coming out, the more understanding is coming out. So we need to look after each other around us, but also look after the players that come up behind us to make sure it's safer for them and safe enough for the game to carry on, because we love the game. No one wants the game to go away. You know, it's incredible and it makes people feel amazing. So we need to find a balance.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. You need to have that contact in the game, don't you? But it's got to be done in a safe way.
Yeah.
Stevie, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Cheers, Steve. Really, really interesting. And the thing that some people may not know is that Stevie played rugby league. This study was about rugby union players. There's more contact, as I understand it, in rugby union compared to rugby league. So reducing that contact will have, I would have thought, more of an impact on rugby union. But look, I'm not a rugby expert. If you know better, GBviews at GBnews.
Yeah, and look, let us know your thoughts. I'm a mum of a little boy. I'd love him to play rugby. It's been a huge part of my husband's life. And, but do you want your son to suffer in the way that we heard Stevie detailing there? Let us know your views this morning. We're going to take a break. After that, we're going to be joined by the chairman of the Conservative Party, Jake Berry.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday. And we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday. Obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move through. Behind that, tomorrow, again, we'll see a mixture of sunshine and showers and a slightly cooler feel. Can't completely rule out the odd shower in the northwest on Saturday, but at the moment, most places look like being dry and bright on Saturday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss urges European leaders to work together on energy amid continued Conservative Party division.
Good morning, it's 9:01 on Thursday, the 6th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Our top stories this morning then, the Prime Minister will use today's brand new summit of European leaders in Prague to call for unity on the issues of energy and migration in the face of what she's calling Europe's biggest crisis since the Second World War.
It follows a defiant party conference speech in which the Prime Minister reiterated her commitment to growth and vowed to defeat what she called the enemies of enterprise.
Ukraine's rapid advances could see it retake Crimea, according to a senior US official. Vladimir Putin said in a speech yesterday that he planned to stabilise the newly annexed regions.
And it's just been crowned the Great British Pub of the Year. We're live from the Gun Inn in West Sussex to find out what makes it a worthy winner.
I'm interested to hear about the pork scratchings. Get in touch the usual way, via Twitter or email on pub snacks, politics and...
whatever it might be. The dullest man.
Indeed, or the dullest man. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But we begin in Prague, the Czech capital, where Liz Truss is attending a summit of European leaders today with energy and migration all high on the agenda.
Yeah, this comes after her keynote speech at the Conservative Party conference yesterday, where she hit out at an anti-growth coalition, as she called it, who criticised her mini-budget. Our political reporter, Catherine Forster, has the details.
Liz Truss arrived in Birmingham after a torrid first month in office. And for the first 3 days of conference, it only seemed to get worse. So her speech was an attempt to reset, to win over critics inside the party and out.
I have 3 priorities for our economy: growth, growth, and growth.
The Prime Minister was interrupted by Greenpeace protesters, asking who had voted for her changes. But it only seemed to unite members in the hall.
It's always more taxes, more regulation, and more meddling. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
It's just a month since Liz Truss became Prime Minister, but already we've seen accusations of coups, cabinet splits, and even talk about Truss's very survival as PM. Will this speech be enough to turn things around? This is how it went down with members.
She showed she knows what she's talking about. She got them in her hand after about 5 minutes, and then she just grew and grew and grew.
I think she did very well. Yeah, no cheese speech moments. It was really good. I was a bit worried, but no, I think she did a great job.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic, much better than I expected. Before I was a bit worried, but now I feel very reassured.
Birmingham has provided a platform for those who disagree with the PM. Her speech might help win some of them back. But as she scurried to Westminster, she will need to prove she has the strategy and steel to survive. Catherine Forster, GB News.
So that's what happened yesterday. Right now, the Prime Minister in Prague at the European Political Community's inaugural summit. And we can go there live now, speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, the Prime Minister hoping to draw a line under what's been days of divisiveness now amongst the party at this new summit.
Yeah, normally you would expect, wouldn't you, particularly a Brexit-supporting Prime Minister, Liz Truss, would face a more hostile reception here on the continent than back home. But frankly, I think she might be quite relieved in many ways, Paul, to be away from the UK, at least for today. She is due, as you say, here in Prague in the next couple of hours or so. Look at some of the headlines, though. Despite the fact that that speech went under pretty well with lots of the members in the hall and indeed elsewhere, but still Nadine Dorries, former Culture Secretary in the Times today, saying that there is no support for what the Prime Minister is trying to do, that she doesn't have essentially that mandate, if you like, from the party or indeed the public to be so radical, and that she risks losing in a landslide election unless she changes course. It follows on from what we heard from Grant Shapps, another Boris cabinet minister, just a couple of days ago, in which he said that Liz Truss essentially had a week or so to sort things out, or she would be in trouble. So all those domestic problems at home. Here, though, she's going to attend the inaugural session of what's called the European Political Community. It's the brainchild of Emmanuel Macron, the French president. And it is not just an EU summit, if you like. Clearly, that wouldn't be the case if Liz Truss was here. Includes lots of countries around Europe, like Turkey, Norway, lots of the Balkan countries, Azerbaijan and others as well. Russia, Belarus, the two exceptions to that, not least of all because the war in Ukraine, security, and migration are kind of the big issues on the agenda. Energy security in particular. Liz Truss will be wanting to keep a close relationship with the Norwegians as we try and sign a long-term deal with them. President Zelensky is going to dial in, as he usually does these summits, again asking, pleading with Europe to remain united in their cause, trying to win that war against Russia. And this kind of talk about migration, because you have to remember migration has clearly been a big issue for the British government, but it is a big issue for lots and lots of European governments too. Migrants travel through Europe, and Liz Truss, I think, has recognised that if you want to get on top of this issue, you are going to need the cooperation of France and others. And that was the argument she was making to me and other journalists the other night in explaining why she's here. Her argument is that when these big global topics are being talked about, she needs to be at that table. She needs, essentially, to have her voice heard. But you do get a sense that there's been a slight change, at least, in tone when it comes to our relationship with the rest of Europe under this new premiership, with Liz Truss, Paul, even as going as far as saying that she may well be up for hosting the next summit, this European Political Community Summit, in London within the next 6 months or so, which, you know, frankly, is a bit of a sea change in terms of British approach over the last couple of years, not just to the EU, but indeed to other parts of Europe as well.
I wonder if that will happen. Darren McCaffrey with that from Prague. Thank you very much indeed. Just to say and to flag to you at home, we are expecting to hear from Jake Berry, chairman of the Conservative Party, any moment now. Just as soon as we get him, we'll cross back to him. But in the meanwhile, we're going to talk about striking. Yeah, because industrial action is one of the problems that the government is facing. Nurses are going to vote on strike action today, actually. But at the same time, thousands of BT workers going on strike today in a dispute over pay, including 400 emergency call operators. Well, BT said it would do whatever it takes to protect 999 services by moving staff to cover those emergency calls. But our reporter Rosie Wright is at the BT Tower. We had a little glimpse of her a moment ago. Rosie, just fill us in on all of this then, because obviously the new element to this, because this isn't the first time that they've been striking, is the involvement of the 999 callers, which many people may be alarmed to hear.
Isabel, that's exactly right. So BT workers, Openreach engineers have been on strike twice already this year. This is their third round of striking, but they say we're upping the ante, and it's exactly as you've just lined out there. Emergency call handlers, the people who pick up the phone when you ring 999, it looks in the region about 500 of those are also joining the strike action. Let's find out exactly why. Joining me here is the Deputy General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, Andy Kerr. BT have said this is reckless action. So why are you doing it?
Well, I would say it's reckless on behalf of BT. We did actually decide this time to bring all our 999 service workers out and strike at the same time because we've been trying for the last 2 or 3 months to get BT back to the table in negotiations, so we had no option but to up the ante. But
I mean,
this
BT
could have been avoided.
Said,
it could have been avoided.
BT have said you had, at the beginning of the year, really sort of laborious, intensive communication with them, sat around the table.
Rubbish.
They offered you a pay increase of what they say is about 5% for the majority of workers and 8% for the lowest paid. And they've said, actually, that deal is done. So why do you think action now might move the goalposts when BT are being pretty firm here?
Well, let's be clear about, and let's get rid of some of the myths. This great lot of talk that went on in the earlier year, we had 6 meetings, lasted for about, in total about 12 hours. We never got the opportunity to put that pay deal to our members, unlike what the government are trying to say now. We never get an opportunity. This company imposed it. And they say they did it because we rejected it. Again, that is a complete and utter lie. They didn't do that. They told us clearly before they gave us the offer, it's take it or leave it. We are going to impose it. So they told us first. So we are in the position, and we've never spoken to them since. We've never had one real meeting with them all the way through. And we'll put an offer back to them. They've rejected it. We're waiting for them to come back for another proposal. And I've been now waiting for 6 weeks for that. So we've no option but up the ante.
That dialogue is still open. What's important for you is that you have the backing of the public who will be in support of these strikes in upping the ante and involving 999 call handlers. Do you think you're at risk of jeopardising public support?
No, I don't think so. I think quite clearly the public are behind us. Look at what's happening in this country now with the cost of living, and that's one of the big issues we've got. There was a deal, there wasn't a deal actually done, but they imposed a pay rise back in April. Things have changed a hell of a lot since April to where we are now. And this company, like many other companies in this country, large companies, have understood that their workers are under real pressure and have addressed it. This company has refused to do it, and it's making £1.3 billion profit.
You're talking about pressure. How much pressure are you prepared to put on BT and enforce further strike action? Because today is one day, but we've also got the 10th of this month, the 20th and the 24th. Could you really inflict some damage, even on emergency service, how that operates? Are you prepared to do that?
Well, we'll look at what happens over the next few weeks. But the thing is that this could have been avoided. We've asked BT to come back to the table
but going
to negotiate.
forward, rather than what's already happened, how much pressure are you prepared to put on BT and those services?
I'll tell you what, ask BT that question. Ask BT why they will not come to the table and negotiate. That's the question that should be asked. The question should be asked of the company, not of the CWU. We've requested it. I've requested it again this week. And I'll be doing it more formally within the next couple of days.
Have you spoken to BT today?
I haven't spoken to them today. I have spoken to one person in BT over the last couple of days, asking them to come back to the table. They have refused.
They've said, look, for this year, it's done. We've worked out that pay deal in April. For the people who are working in that building and across the country for BT, is there a point in which you say, maybe we're not going to get better than this, what BT say is 5% increase? They say that's the highest pay offer they've offered in 20 years. It's time to accept it and move on.
At the same time as the highest inflation for 40 years, you know, so we can play about with the figures all the like. The thing is, it's quite clearly not enough for our members, and it's not 5%. It's an average of 4.8 across the piece, and I think, you know, quite clearly they say that...
What would be enough?
Well, I'm not going to negotiate on television at all. I want to sit down with the company. They have said quite clearly, as you have said, they don't want to open up 2022 pay. That is their position. It's not my preferred position, but it's theirs. But we are prepared to talk. We are prepared to negotiate. That's what
and
we
you've
do.
made that clear. Andy, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And a little later on this morning, I'm going to speak to some of the people who are stood behind that picket line now to understand why they have decided today it's more important to stand behind this line than go in and do my job. Andy, thank you very much. I must stress that BT have said they are reshuffling staff around to make sure that those positions of people who would answer the 999 calls will be filled by other personnel. I've got more updates for you, though, across the day from here outside the BT Tower.
Good to know. Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. With the time at 9:14, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines and some breaking news just in the last few moments. We're hearing police in Thailand have said that at least 31 people have been killed, including many children, after a gunman opened fire at a children's daycare centre in the northeastern province of Nong Bua Lam Phu. In a statement, they say the gunman was a former police officer and a manhunt is currently underway.
Yeah, mass shootings in Thailand are very rare, by the way. The Prime Minister will urge European leaders to act more quickly to end the reliance on Russian energy supplies at a summit in Prague later today. She'll also call for greater unity to combat the causes of migration and disrupt people trafficking gangs.
Sir Keir Starmer's renewing calls for Liz Truss to reverse her budget as he warns families are facing eye-watering mortgage increases. Analysis by the Labour Party suggests an average UK buyer coming off a 2-year fixed mortgage could experience a near £500 monthly hike if interest rates hit 6%.
Let's get some more reaction then to that speech by Liz Truss yesterday, and also the fact she's in Prague for the inaugural European Political Community Summit. We're joined now, I'm pleased to say, by the chairman of the Conservative Party, Jake Berry MP. Morning to you, Jake. Good to see you. First of all, I just wanted to start with the speech by Liz Truss yesterday. She talked about an anti-growth coalition, and she reeled off a list of names that she considered to be in the anti-growth coalition. She said, starting with environmentalists, are they all anti-growth? Is it not possible to be green and support growth?
Well, I think the point the Prime Minister is making is that in this country we've got a real choice. We in the Conservative Party are doing something which I believe is the right thing to do, which is going to increase growth in this country. We're not doing that because we just believe growth in and of itself is a good thing. It's not some academic exercise. We're doing it because we want to drive prosperity into every corner of our United Kingdom and through the door of every household in this country. And the wider point I think the Prime Minister was making is that there are people who believe there's a different approach. There are people who think that the highest tax burden for 70 years and a shrinking economy or an economy that isn't growing.
So just to be clear,
is the way to go. I just disagree with them, and I think the Prime Minister's right.
So I just need to be clear on this, because she put environmentalists in that bracket. You can't be green and support growth. It's either one or the other.
Well, that isn't, I believe, what the Prime Minister is saying. But I think people up and down this country who want to see things like HS2 built, who want to have improved road networks and transportation, will, on many occasions and over many decades, in fact, it's not a new thing, will have been frustrated by people who, even after the planning process has gone ahead, even after, in many cases, we've had a public inquiry, then go and disrupt the work on that site. And we've seen it with major infrastructure projects now for decades. And I think the point the Prime Minister is making is once, development, once infrastructure projects have been through the full process, then in fact, they shouldn't be stopped. And the other point, of course, people who are trying to get to work, sometimes in central London, but across our country, who find themselves with people super glued to roads when all they're actually trying to do is get their kids to school and go into work, find it extremely disruptive.
Okay,
we are on the side of those hard-working families who want to get to work, not on the side of the people who superglue themselves to motorways.
Just to be clear, who would be in this anti-group coalition? Because obviously it's very helpful to try and find a common enemy, isn't it, when you've got a cabinet that's disagreeing, a party that's falling out with one another. I mean, Boris Johnson presumably would be in that because he put a moratorium on fracking and had lots of green policies. Would Sir David Attenborough or indeed Prince William be in this anti-growth coalition?
Well, I think the point the Prime Minister was making, and it is worth repeating, is that, most people, in fact, most families in this country get up in the morning, get their kids dressed if they've got kids, or get out the house if they don't, and go to work to try and improve the lives of their family. And when they are confronted, as they have on many occasions in recent months, by protesters who are disrupting infrastructure, stopping trains running, stopping people driving down the road to take their kids to school, I think those people would accept that those individuals are part of an anti-growth coalition which are trying to stop people just going about their normal lives and getting on for themselves and their family. I think the Prime Minister was unapologetic about being on the side of hard-working families up and down our country. I don't want to get into a sort of, is this person anti-growth, is that person anti-growth? I think the truth is that when you see it, you know it.
OK, well, fair enough. Do you think her speech yesterday, and indeed the creation of this group, this common enemy, has done enough then to unite the party and to stop breaks in discipline within the party?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, in my opinion, I've heard lots of leaders' speeches in my time. Not it's the first time I've ever heard it as party chairman, but in my time in the Conservative Party, I thought it was an excellent speech. And I think what she did was advocate beyond a sort of mantra of we are going for growth. I think she spoke to every single household in this country to say, this is why we're going for growth, and this is what it means for you. And of course, let's not forget that already the government has proved why it is working hard for households. Just this month, the average family energy bill was predicted to go up to around £6,000. Through the action we have taken, that has been brought down to £2,500, which, apart from other things, is tackling inflation, but is helping families with their bills. And of course, again this month, when people's pay check drops through the front door or more likely arrives in their inbox, they'll see that every single working house person in this country has had a cut in their national insurance. That's the message the Prime Minister was sending. And she is on the side of the British people. She shares their values and she shares their ambitions, both for themselves and for their family.
If she does share their ambitions and she is on the side of hard-working families, why hasn't she committed to uprating benefits in line with inflation? Most of the people who are using those benefits, who are on universal credit, are also in work, and that would help them. So why are pensioners protected by getting their state pension increased in line with inflation, but hard-working families aren't, those who are using benefits?
Well, dealing very directly with pensioners, you, I'm sure, are aware that both in terms of disability benefits and, in fact, pensions, it's a statutory requirement that those are increased in line with inflation. But those inflation figures for all benefits are the autumn inflation figures. I believe that the government should work in facts rather than sort of crystal ball gazing. We will know later on in this quarter what those figures are, and when those figures arrive, it is absolutely usual, and it's happened in every government, including Labour governments and governments for decades, that the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions and the Chancellor make a decision on what they are going to do with benefits like universal credit. That decision then comes to the Cabinet. But in truth, you're asking me to comment on, why haven't we made a decision? Well, the truth is we don't actually have the facts. We don't know what the inflation figure is, so we can't make a decision until that information is received.
It hasn't stopped your Cabinet colleagues Penny Mordaunt and Robert Buckland saying that they think that benefits should go up in line with inflation, as Boris Johnson did indeed say. I wonder what your own view is.
Well, my own view is it is probably the greatest privilege of my life, serving in the Cabinet of this country, and my own personal view is that those Cabinet discussions which will take place once those figures are known, once we can make a decision based on fact, should take place around the Cabinet table. A decision should be made collectively, and whatever people's own views, the arena for discussion is the Cabinet room, and that's where those discussions should stay.
Really appreciate your time this morning, Jake. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
That is MP Jake Berry, the chairman of the Conservative Party. It's 9:23. Should we go to the pub?
Yes, let's do it. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's whiz to West Sussex. The Great British Pub of the Year award for 2022 has gone to
The Gun Inn in Findon, a family-run business headed up by Sally Harris. Morning to you, Sally. Congratulations.
Good morning.
Just tell us how you're feeling about having the best pub in Britain.
Oh, Just totally overwhelmed, to be honest with you. It's very exciting. Yeah, I'm really happy.
What makes
Feel a
your
little bit
pub
undeserving.
so special? Sorry.
Oh gosh, what makes it so special? Probably like all the people in it, the team that run it, the great food. I have to say, the food's amazing, and just a little bit something different, I suppose.
I am fascinated to find out what pub snacks you've got there. Do you serve pork scratchings? Is it a good selection?
Pub snacks. We do, yes. Pork scratchings, scampi fries, all the above.
And I saw on the sign outside the pub there that you've got award-winning food. So this isn't your first award, presumably. Just give us a sense of what your menu looks like, and you know what people can expect if they come through the doors at the Gun Inn.
The food's so tasty. It's what would you expect? Just really good home cooked food, pub cooked food, a little bit different.
And how connected are you to, because I know pubs are a real focal point for the community. They play such an important role. How connected are you to the community? Do you kind of know everyone in the area, and how do you kind of keep that community
you can't
spirit
avoid
alive?
knowing everyone. So we're right in the heart of the village. Everyone knows me and I know everyone. And it's right in the middle of the square. There's actually 3 pubs in the village. And there's about 1,000 people. And we've got really good connections.
Oh, well, Sally Harris, congratulations. Pleased to hear it. I know Paul's delighted there's pork scratchings. I love a bit of a scampi fry. We'll hopefully make a visit down to West Sussex at some point. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Please do. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you at home for joining us this morning. I won't be back tomorrow. It says in the autocue I'll be back, but I won't. I'll be back on Monday.
Stephen and Anne who will be checking in tomorrow from 6. Coming up next, it's an IFLR in Eamonn with that briefing. Stand by.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A blustery day again today, but not quite as windy as yesterday. Many places dry and bright with sunny spells, but some places seeing showers. Broadly speaking, it's low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, and plenty of isobars in between. The closer the isobars, the stronger the wind, so the stiffest winds today will be across northern Scotland, where there'll be plenty of showers. Quite a lot of clouds spilling into North Wales, northwest England this morning. A little bit of rain likely at times here, particularly around the middle part of the day. Much of southern England, eastern England, the Midlands and northeast Scotland dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine. As I said, still a bit breezy, but not as windy as yesterday, and we'll see showers, particularly for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland this afternoon. Temperature-wise, generally a touch above average, a little bit warmer than yesterday, obviously feeling a bit cooler because it's still breezy, but in the sunny spells in the southeast, 19 degrees is likely. Through this evening, I think we'll see the rain pepping up a little bit more across western parts of Scotland, and this line of rain then tracks southwards into Northern Ireland through the early hours. A few showers coming into the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England too. A fairly mild night, certainly compared to the one just gone. And then we'll into Friday, which will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, but with also thrown into the mix this band of rain, which is sinking southwards. Certainly we'll see a few more showers tomorrow across parts of southern England, the Midlands, South Wales, but still some decent breaks in the cloud and some sunshine. That band of rain pushing south, initially for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England, Wales, and by the end of the day into the Midlands and South Wales. Could be quite heavy, but it should move